of the Stearns County Board will come to order. Roll call will show that all commissioners are present. We have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approving agenda is a little bit more detailed than we're typically used to. Under the consent agenda, there's an item that was added by Jody to approve a variance for a construction to be item number 9. And then another addition will be considering a letter from the Big Fish Lake Association under Environmental Services. And then, let's see. Then we'll be adding an item under administration, the CARES Act, and what the latest and greatest impact on the county is. And what else? We also got an airport report from yesterday's meeting to bring you and the public up to speed on what was decided. So with those additions, can we approve the agenda? Want any of those repeated?
Firstly, I'll move the agenda, and Mr. Chair, do you have your camera on?
No. You want the camera, huh? Joe,
And yes, we always like seeing you, Lee.
Joe, you're tougher than you look. Oh, that's the mic. Here, let's do the camera. Stop my video. Oh, there I am. Okay. See? Once again I showed up sober. All right. Consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the? Do we have a motion to approve the consent?
You got a motion and a second, Lee.
All right. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
You have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Bill, did you move on to the consent?
I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we do the agenda and the consent agenda in one motion? Oh, okay. Boy. Let me see. Get down here.
Should probably do a vote on
There. Am I on?
the agenda.
Yeah.
Am I on? Okay. All right.
You just need a vote to approve the agenda.
All right. We have a motion and a second. I thought I heard that. Do we get that? All right. Okay. All those in favor say aye. District 1.
Aye.
District 2.
Aye.
3.
Aye.
4. Aye. And 5. Steve.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
We're getting something. The next item then would be got the consent done. Next item would be NICA. Is that correct?
You're muted again. There you go.
All right.
There you go. Nope, now you're muted. I'm messing with you.
No. Okay, well, it looks like I'm going to be holding down the space bar for about an hour and a half here. That's how the cookie crumbles. Okay, we have the consent agenda done then. All right. Is NICA folks available?
Mr. Chair, you didn't do the consent agenda yet.
Didn't? Okay. Somebody want to move the consent agenda? The only addition is that highway item for number 9. We should have gotten an email.
I'll move the consent agenda, Merkin.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. All right. All those in favor say aye. District 1?
Aye.
2,
Aye.
3,
Aye.
4 aye, 5.
Aye.
Okay. Now we can do Micah. Are the Micah folks available?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners.
All right, man.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Let her rip, Matt.
Good, thank you. Well, good morning. Good, of course, to join you all on the Stearns County Board this morning and appreciate your membership in the Inter-County Association, and Commissioner Lensmeyer and Clark particularly appreciate as well your service on behalf of the Stearns County Board on the MICA board. So thank you for that. We are always enjoy getting out to Stearns and appreciate the opportunity to join you during this these unprecedented times remotely this morning. So speaking of unprecedented times, of course, let me just pause. I think that we were going to try and share with you on the screen. We have two documents, a PowerPoint and we have a legislative summary that should be in your packets. Do you have those, Mr. Chair?
I think I do, yep. Yes, I do. Go ahead, Matt.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair and members, just a really quick recap, because I know you all have followed it over the last 4 or 5 months in the newspaper as well, but back on February 11th was when regular session started. If you go to the second slide in the PowerPoint presentation there, just a quick recap. At the time regular session started back in early February, you know, it was everyone agreed bonding bill was going to be the most important thing. It was a bonding session, needed to get a bonding bill done. Absolutely everybody was on board. There was a slight positive balance. The world was, of course, aware of the COVID crisis. It had not reached our borders here in a significant way yet in Minnesota. And that quickly changed by mid-March and the end of March, where we shifted to the legislative session essentially being put on hold in a hiatus, meeting on an on-call basis for a period of time only, and all of the agenda switching to only things that were needed to address the COVID crisis and that were agreed upon by all 4 caucuses was the protocol that was being followed. As we moved then into late May and some of the early responses to the COVID crisis, and I'll just say that Micah's, let me just pause there a minute on slide 3 to point out that Micah's agenda really, and the work that we do on your behalf, adjusted in that time frame to support the effort. Obviously, with Administrator Williams, who does a fantastic job, and I really enjoy and appreciate working with, and your whole team was going through all sorts of questions, as were all local governments and the state agencies, about how do we deliver government remotely and continue essential services. So it was a significant time of change and unprecedented measures for everybody. And of course, that meant that we also needed to engage differently with the legislature and with the governor's office in terms of how the executive orders were crafted, how they would impact local governments, what federal government legislation was passing and how that would impact local governments. And of course, what legislation was needed in order to give temporary authority and flexibility to local governments in order to continue those essential services in a safe and ongoing way during closures and continuing forward. So That became a situation that I think really highlighted Micah's work with our staff groups. As many of you know, as I move from the bottom of slide 3 there into the top of slide 4, Micah has established a number of staff groups that meet on a monthly basis, if not more often, as we did during the high points of the initial first months of the COVID crisis. The administrators, fiscal officers, human resource directors, and human service directors, public health directors. And I believe that those staff groups always are a great opportunity for exchange and information that brings value and helps share information both to us at the state level in St. Paul so that we know what to work for on your behalf, but also learning from each other. And so those became, I think, really relevant and were highlighted during that time. By March through April, of course, we also received a lot of feedback on, I'm going to jump to slide 5, a lot of feedback from staff groups that we then were able to take to the legislature and identify changes that were made during multiple pieces of legislation that passed during those infrequent sessions in April and the early part of May that were helpful to counties. Legislation like appropriations for public health, human service delivery program flexibilities, and things that seem a little bit more minor but were relevant. Public meeting changes to ensure that everyone could continue meeting remotely but in compliance with open meeting laws. A lot of temporary extensions and authorities around things like driver's licenses that were important to local communities, and also service centers in terms of extending those, the period to which those expiration dates lasted, so that there wasn't a flood of people and that could be managed a bit better. But also electronic transactions around land documents and other documents, regulatory documents that counties administer. And also some election law changes that I think were really important to getting money out to county election officers across the state and giving them some temporary flexibilities and a long runway, if you will, to plan for and prepare for primary and general elections that are coming up here in a couple weeks for mail voting and of course, November. By the turning to slide 6, by the end of the regular session, as we anticipated and had been laying the groundwork and working with legislators in a different format, of course, all of the continued focus on COVID, managing the pandemic, merged with a reemergence of all of the key issues that had been with us at the beginning of the session. So bonding, supplemental budget, whether or not there was going to be a tax bill. And the one significant addition that had been added to that mix was that in late March, Congress had passed the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Relief Act, the third version of a federal relief act that included $150 billion across the country in a corona relief fund, of which just under 2.2 billion was Minnesota's allocation, and of course 1.87 billion of that came directly to the state of Minnesota, with the expectation that some of that would be distributed to local governments, counties, and other local governments that did not receive direct allocations from the federal government, as Hennepin and Ramsey had. That was identified by Micah as a high priority, obviously given the cost impacts that counties outside of Hennepin and Ramsey were also experiencing, and certainly Stearns has had periods of localized challenges, as you know, well know, with the coronavirus spread. And so we wanted to make sure those costs were covered and that became a high priority for us, along with bonding and budget and other issues. And it frankly became one of the few bright spots. I think, given everything that was going on, if the bonding bill had passed, it would generally have been, along with a number of the health and human service changes and flexibilities that Nancy will talk about, all things considered, it would have been a pretty good session for counties. I think the fact that we still don't have a bonding bill is a real challenge, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the CARES Act, I believe, did become a bright spot. Quickly turning to page 7, there was a bipartisan agreement that was worked out towards the end of the first special session, leading up to the first special session, I should say. That agreement did not get passed by the legislature, but the governor did implement it through executive actions consistent with the bipartisan agreement that had been reached. And I believe that local government associations were a big part of pushing for that. The other thing that smoothed the way for that, and I should call out a couple of members. Senator Julie Rosen in the Senate, chair of the Senate Finance Committee, was a tremendous leader. Chair Paul Marquardt in the House, the Tax Committee chair, was a tremendous leader. Carrie Dietzick from Minneapolis and Pat Garofalo from Dakota County were the members who really worked behind the scenes to bring that together. A big part of what made that happen is that there was some guidance that came out from the federal government that indicated that instead of $667 million, there was about $841.5 million that was eligible to be distributed to local governments. So that additional resource, if you will, kind of smoothed the way for a compromise that resulted in 55% of that amount being distributed to the 85 counties. So about $467.3 million to 85 counties, of which 19.36 there, as you see at the top of this page, was Stearns County's allocation. Since then, we've been working, MICA, in partnership with AMC, and of course the two state agencies that are tasked with administering and overseeing this. There are some very broad uses under federal law and guidance that these funds can be used for. They do have to be used as it currently stands by December 30th of this calendar year. The state actually has placed an expectation upon us that counties use those monies by December 1st. And there are a number of caveats. They cannot be used for replacing lost revenues. There is an expectation that the state has that they do cover any costs that counties have for a local FEMA match related to COVID, any COVID-related workers' compensation costs, and any COVID-related public health costs. But of course, the uses are much broader than that, and I know that you've been having a conversation, as all counties have been, since getting those funds, and anything we can do to help support that, we will continue doing. I'll just pause quickly there. Let me wrap up with a few points on that, and then I'm going to turn it over to Nancy. We're also following, of course, the conversation is very relevant here as to whether or not there will be a fourth package passed by Congress. Not only would additional money support for state and local governments that goes beyond this calendar year be important to the fiscal tsunami that we will likely continue to face here with the economic challenges related to COVID. But there's also a discussion of extending that December 30th date, a conversation about allowing the existing CARES Act allocations to be used for revenue loss also. So just a number of things in that federal legislative discussion. There's obviously the big issues around the unemployment extension and the payroll tax implications, and a whole bunch of things that are less directly related to how it will impact the county's bottom lines or these CARES monies, but we are nonetheless following it because it could have implications. here. We're also continuing to work even as we look forward to the 2021 session on the bonding bill, and Steve's going to cover that, and then I can chime in more on that. We are hoping, there's just so many things in that bill. We'll talk about transportation, but obviously local water projects, housing, public mental health infrastructure. Just it would be the largest bill in state history and is well needed. And so we are hoping that that could potentially happen here in September and are continuing to make that push. I'll pause if you have any questions. I'm going to wrap up at the end with just letting you know the fiscal situation. After Nancy and Steve talk, I'll be chiming back in, but otherwise we can move to Nancy unless there's questions, Mr. Chair.
All right, if there's no questions, can we move on to Nancy?
Nancy's part of the agenda.
I believe that Nancy's on, yep.
There we go. Good morning, everyone. Nancy Selesky's here, and Steve Novak is with me as well. Starting with Health and Human Services, another one of the things that got hung up at the end of the regular session was the omnibus HHS policy bill. And that was due to the fact that some folks did not want to have in statute DHS flexibilities. And so that got hung up until the first special session. We were obviously concerned about that because that's where our waiver extension language was. We also had a couple of priority projects for MICA, one dealing with early education, and the other was a jail diversion project. So when they came back during the first special session, they did pass that HHS policy bill with those items, those MICA priorities in it. And then they decided to address the waiver extension bill in a separate bill. So due to COVID, as you know, we're all operating very differently, as is evidenced by this meeting in this kind of format. And counties have had to find ways to work much more innovatively and efficiently, if you will. So to that end, DHS had granted almost, I think, 70 waiver extensions. And there was concern from the counties that what happens at the end of the emergency? Do we just flip the switch and go back to doing business as was? That was a real concern for us because we've all had to adapt, of course, during this process. So to that end, AMC appointed a blue ribbon committee comprised of 15 county commissioners, 5 of which are MICA commissioners. I just want to call them out. Commissioners Kiskaden, Phoebe, Landcamer, Rogness, and Slawick. And they were charged with looking at all of the waivers that had been approved by DHS and looking at what makes sense to try and continue, and frankly, which ones maybe we didn't want to have continued. So they went through all of that process, came up with about 15 recommendations. Then the Department of Human Services kind of built on from our list, and I just want to enforce that this was driven by counties. They started this whole process, so it was a very good piece of work, and it was a very fast turnaround. It was about maybe 2 or 3 weeks before we had to have this to the legislature. DHS added a few things, as did several legislators, and they came up with this list that they brought up during the special session. It did pass. I want to mention, starting at the beginning, that all waivers are extended for a minimum of 60 days, so after the emergency ends. But then those 15 separate waivers that counties had identified are now continued until June of next year, 2021. So this puts the legislature in charge in terms of whether they want to see these continue, whether they want to add to the list, et cetera, which was, the pushback that we were getting is there was just too much, perhaps too much authority within the administration, and the legislature really wanted to be involved in some of these discussions. So they're in charge. In terms of what those waivers do, they're very heavy on everything. I mean, as you know, we use telehealth now for waiver programs, targeted case management, healthcare, mental health care, substance use care. So those are the kinds of things that are continued until June of next year. There also was a modification of certain licensing requirements related to both substance use and mental health facilities. They also included a temporary absence provision. This is for folks that are receiving housing support, state housing support, and they contract COVID. We want to make sure that they have a place to go home to at the end of, after they have recovered from COVID. So those are a sample of some of the things that were included. Also flexibility relating to personal care assistance services, using telemedicine for the medical cannabis program, things like that. So again, very heavy on tele everything. Another bill that passed during the special session number 1 was a rate increase for providers who care for low-income children in the CCAP program. And this legislation brought us into compliance with the federal government. And I do want to mention that it's being paid for by the federal government because there was a surplus in the block grant relative to child care development. So that was paid for by the feds, and that did get passed and signed into law by Governor Walz. I'm going to advance to special session 3, and we did get an additional waiver that we had been working on during special session 1, and that deals with, it allows for the remote interview for MFIP clients. It does require electronic signatures. It does not permit verbal signatures, so they have to sign it at least electronically for that to go into effect. So that additional waiver was added in the 3rd session. And then I think you've all heard about the day treatment facilities that have, been at the legislature for months. Senator Abler was working on this and others. They, excuse me, during the 3rd session, they did appropriate $20 million to those facilities to be able to keep them open. They put $20 million into retention grants. And those eligible services are adult day services, day training and habilitation, day support services, things like that. Then they also put an additional $10 million for public health grants to those eligible disability service providers who have implemented public health measures that facilitate social distancing. So that did happen, and that is on page 6 of your report if you're following along on that. In terms of public health, you all know that T21 is the law in Minnesota. You have to be 21 to purchase tobacco, e-cigarettes, any nicotine projects. It also expands the prevention of tobacco use to charter schools. In terms of other things in the public health realm, Matt mentioned the money that they put in March into a public health response account. They put $20.9 million, so almost $21 million into that account. And $8.5 million of that went directly to local public health for this COVID response. A few weeks later, they added about $50 million to that account. Again, those monies go through the Department of Health, and they're to respond to the COVID outbreak. They also put $150 million into a healthcare response fund, and this is to make grants to eligible providers for costs that are relating to the response of to COVID, and to fund the establishment and operation of temporary sites to provide testing, treatment beds, so that folks can be isolated during this pandemic. What didn't happen, I would refer you to page 7 of the report. I just want to highlight a couple of things. As you know, early in session, the governor had a supplemental budget bill of about $160 million, and included in that was $8.8 million for counties to reimburse us for an accounting error, a DHS accounting error, relating to substance use disorder settings provided in IMD facilities. That was included in his original recommendations of $160 million. Of course, that supplemental budget bill did not pass. They did come to sort of an agreement, but has not passed yet. But I think they came up with a dollar amount for possibly a supplemental budget bill if and when they go back into special session. Much pared down, $58 million is what they're looking at. The last version that we saw did not include that county appropriation to make us whole on this issue. But we do continue to lobby key legislators as well as the governor's office on that. I think you've all been present where the governor has indicated that this was a priority and he wanted to see this get done. So we're continuing to work on that. Specific to Stearns, I think, as you know, Senator Ralph, your senator out in that area, meets with the directors, including Stearns, Sherburne, Benton, and Wright County on a fairly regular basis. And in one of the conversations, one of the things that came up was the concern about the immediate response within 24 hours of face-to-face contact in child protection situations. Excuse me. We asked and had legislation introduced actually by Senator Ralph and Representative Pinto that says that we would have 5 days to respond if there is a law enforcement investigation going on, a current investigation going on. In other words, the child has been seen by a professional already, and if the child is in a location that's confirmed to restrict the access to the alleged offender. In that case, very limited case, we'd have 5 days to respond. Again, we got it introduced before COVID, early in February, and just that it stopped because of COVID. This was also an issue that was discussed during the waiver discussion, but the legislature just didn't want to address child protection issues as part of the waiver discussion at this point. So we will be going back again next year, trying to get that legislation passed. Another item I just want to mention that didn't happen is broadband. It was passed by the Senate twice. The House just didn't get to it. I mention it because included in that bill is $2 million for telemedicine equipment reimbursement that both county boards and local public health folks are eligible to apply for. Representative Eklund is the champion in the House and Senator Westrom in the Senate. I did talk to Representative Eklund last week, and he did indicate that they're going to go for it and try and get it passed again if and when they meet in the fourth special session, which we think may be in September. With that, I think I will stop. I think, again, all things considered, it was a decent year for counties with this new mode that we're in. I just want to call out your staff that work, very closely with Micah and are just such a great asset. Melissa Huberty, Julie Ellis, Janet Goligoski, and of course Renee Frauendienst, who has now retired, have just been just very instrumental in getting our platforms together and are at the legislature when needed, et cetera. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Westrom is actually a shaker and a mover, as I understand it, on 5G as well. That might be out of your area, but telemedicine 5G would seem to go together.
Mr. Chair, yes, I think everyone recognizes that there are pockets of the state that just are not up to speed, if you will, and need work, need dollars to do it.
Mr. Chair?
All right.
Nancy? Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes, I can hear you.
It's Terrell. Thank you. Thank all of you for your work. Two things, just piggybacking off of what our chair just brought up. I mean, broadly, obviously, I know all of you know this, whatever we can do to get anything more that relates to connectivity, devices, et cetera, whether it's, people in half our county that are still struggling, whether it is families with kids trying to do homework, whether it's seniors that don't have devices to stay connected. It just continues to be so huge. But whether it's the federal or the state level, those are issues that just cut across everything and are just so important. And then I would be remiss. It's great yellow line language got put in, but that we're doing something we think is even better. And so the question is, are we hindering or unintentionally, negating the good things that are happening with our community action team and others? And I know Melissa and other staff are talking about it, but it's continued to be a struggle to help people understand yellow line's great, but we've gone a lot further.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner, on the broadband issue first, I should have mentioned that included in that Westrom Eklund bill is $15 million for distance learning, and then an additional $10 million for the border-to-border broadband grant program. So that, if it passes, does include additional funding there. In terms of yellow line, while that position came to us from Blue Earth County, what it did is allow for medical assistance reimbursement to be able to track or monitor that person's, to ensure that person is following the treatment program that was put in front of them. the language, while identified as the Yellow Line Jail Diversion Project, this CMS required us to tweak the language so that we could get this reimbursement. So I'll talk to Melissa more about what's going on in Stearns County, but it's not
Well, that'd be great.
limited.
We obviously, our partners, we all had to work together pretty hard to figure out how to communicate before this language, so that's good. But as you know, legislatively, as things get named, they take on lives of their own, and don't want to diminish any of the good work Blue Earth County has done, but we're now in the next generation. And as we're all trying to find ways to better serve individuals and reduce costs, we need, it's just really helpful if it doesn't look like there's, that we get stuck in time. I'll just leave it that way. Thank you. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Steve?
Yes, Steve Novak, handling the transportation issues. Can everyone hear me? I'm going to assume you can. Okay.
Yes, Steve.
Well, let me just summarize by saying in the transportation area for this session, 2020, with all of its complications, the bonding bill is about 95% of what transportation was all about this year. And of course, here we are looking at a fourth possible special session and no bonding bill, even though we've had an agreed to package between the Republican Senate and the DFL House since the end of the regular session. The first roadblock was the decision on the part of the House Minority Leader to hold the bonding bill hostage in exchange for his desired softening of the governor's executive authority. And of course, there's been no movement on that. And so far, the threat to withhold the bonding bill has held up. And now recently, right when we think there's been some progress on that issue, the Senate decided to block the confirmation of the labor commissioner, which has not helped the relationship with the governor. And that now becomes a second barrier to getting this bonding bill done. Saying all of that, there's a lot of conversations that have gone on amongst many parties, including the people at the top, that it's September or nothing with the bonding bill, and pressure is building in many parts of the state over the water issues that was mentioned by Matt earlier, but also a significant transportation component to this bonding bill. It's worth fighting for because, as I'm going to highlight for you in just 1 minute, if we were to be able to pass this package, it would be the most significant funding for roads and probably in the last 20 years. So I'll take you through it now and explain why that's the case. As you may recall, the top MICA priorities in transportation this year were the local road wetland mitigation issue, significant new money for local roads as defined by county roads, and significant new money for local bridges as defined by county bridges. So let me just take you through that and a few other issues to tell you what's at stake here. On the local road wetland mitigation issue, in the end, the agreed to number was $18 million in bonds and $8 million in cash. And that $8 million in cash would help respond to the immediate concern, which is 5 of the 10 wetland districts are out of credits. Another 3 of the remaining 5 are almost completely out. And what's at stake, amongst other things, is your next spring construction season. If this issue isn't resolved, to put it bluntly, there basically won't be one. And you may recall that back in 2017, we needed emergency legislation, or we would have lost the spring construction season there. So the state has been lagging behind in their financial commitment to this program, which has been in place since 1996. It's a good program. It's meaningful in both the environmental and economic development areas, and it is at risk. Then let me move to local bridges. Under this bill, there would be $30 million that would be distributed across the state for local bridges in a process that's been in place for years that the counties have input in. So we know what those projects are, and we methodically go through them as the money comes through, and $30 million would be significant compared to recent years. In addition to that, there was an agreement for $50 million for the St. Paul Kellogg Avenue Bridge, which both the Republican Senate and the DFL House, I think, have agreed as major statewide impact. And this would be a major financial component to get that bridge fixed. Then let me move to local roads. Under local roads, there would be a significant investment of $80 million, of which about 53.5 would be distributed on a state competitive basis. And then another 25 million or so is dedicated to specific projects around the state, of which there is significant amounts of money that would at least indirectly affect Stearns County from the standpoint of a lot of money being spent on Highway 10 south of you. Also the Sherburne County Zimmerman Exchange. And so a lot of important transportation, road and bridge work wrapped up inside this package. Moving on, there's $8 million for township road improvements, $2 million for safe routes to school, $3 million for port development assistance, $3 million for Minnesota rail service improvements, $1 million for railroad warning signal replacements, $2 million for Greater Minnesota Transit, and $1.5 million for the Transportation Economic Development Program, the so-called TED program, which only non-metro counties are eligible for. Let me quickly touch on transportation policy issues. It won't take long because when the COVID-19 thing hit, they had an agreement that they wouldn't move policy bills unless all 4 caucus leaders agreed. That limited this jurisdiction significantly. But back in early March, there was one major bill that did pass, which had a lot of bipartisan agreement to move forward with a unique federal transportation finance tool, the Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, TIFIA, to fund the reconstruction of the Nicollet to New Ulm stretch of Trunk Highway 14, which is considerably south of York County. On the other hand, this is a major highway project that's been going on for years. And by taking this off the state books and moving it to the federal, it loosened up a lot of additional money to be competed for all around the state. So that's helpful to everyone. So let me just conclude by saying, and put this in the context of, I guess, what I'm almost going to call a crisis here in a couple of cases. If we do not get this bonding bill passed, a number of significant things will not happen, and I'm going to quickly list what they are. There won't be any local bridge bonding money. There'll be no money for the local road wetland replacement program, which means your spring construction program will be significantly at risk. No Greater Minnesota Transit money, no port development money, no rail service development revenue, basically no comprehensive transportation financing, and no transit safety legislation. So it's a significant issue. I think it's being talked about all throughout the state. There's a lot of pressure being put on, and we hope that they'll find a way in the next couple of weeks to come together. So that would be my report, Mr. Chair. I just want to add one thing, that we work significantly with your county engineer. We know you know how good she is, Jody. We just want to let you know that we also know how good she is, and I personally appreciate her work. She's an active participant in our monthly meetings and other things that go on throughout the year that help us put together, I think, a pretty good platform and respond to a variety of other issues. She's excellent. I'll just leave it at that. So I would be happy to answer questions if there are any.
Steve, I would think that
If wetland credits are exhausted or near exhaustion, wouldn't that be an indication of the program's success? It would seem to me that a thing to do might be to claim victory and move off the battlefield.
Well, I agree with most of that. The problem with moving off the battlefield is those pots of money are essentially empty. And under the 96 law, as Jody and other county engineers around the state put their projects together in January and February and put their bids out to your private contractors who do most of that work, those projects won't be able to go forward if the tenets of the law are not met, and they can't be met without the money. So that's the dilemma.
And also,
Or Mr. Chair, or the law gets changed to, exempt those requirements, because to me, it's amazing the hindrance, stuff like this can cause for minor road repair issues or replacement issues. You're using taxpayer dollars to buy expensive credits, which drives up the cost of these projects.
I think that's indisputable. You're accurate. There is a particular component of all this, though, that seems to be a continual roadblock to some of these changes that I think you're referring to, and that's the Federal Corps of Engineers, who's an integral part of this process, and they have a pretty disciplined position against the kind of changes I think you're thinking and talking about, and that has been a roadblock for quite a few years now in terms of what otherwise might be state legislative policy changes that could loosen this up some.
Yeah, and part of it is, these private road land, these bank credits take so long to create. It'd be nice if I think we talked about this before, if somebody commits to it, give them an advance, so you can say these credits are coming online, and kind of doing a accrual.
I mean, you're absolutely right. The frustration with what you're saying is that the law, as it was designed in 1996, really provided for a permanent solution of that. The state's main responsibility was to be the funder, because the DNR is involved, local counties are involved, the federal government. And basically the model that was set forth in 96, if it had been consistently applied, which was every 2 years when the state does a bonding bill, put in $10 million and have it allocated over a 2-year period, unbelievably, over all these years, 30 years, that would have worked and we wouldn't be having this discussion. But over the last decade and a half, after the first 20 years of the state sort of keeping that pattern in place, they started to falter. Instead of putting in 10, they'd put in 6. Instead of putting in 10, they'd put in 4. And then in 2016, if you recall the big political battle that led to the state shutdown, that also led to no bonding bill, and that really broke the back of this process, and we've been behind the 8 ball ever since. What this bill would do with the 8 million cash and the 18 million bonds is that cash would bring those pots up to speed, and the 18 million would put in place the process that's needed to get back on the cycle. And Matt and I and others have had innumerable meetings with individual legislators, and we get nothing but heads nodding yes. And then ultimately, the bonding bill's coming up short. This bonding bill actually would come very close to complying with what we're recommending collectively the solution is, which is just another way of saying how sad it will be if they don't figure out a way to pass the bonding bill.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know if this is
Steve, I agree with you about the wetland replacement. Also, I think we got an issue with the 2-to-1. I don't think any of us argue about the importance of clean water, but the cost of those roads sometimes becomes prohibitive because of that. Steve, I just was looking at $1 million to townships for township roads. Is that money for special projects, or is that going to be generally distributed with aid? The point is that there's a lot of townships, there's a lot of township roads. $8 million across the state doesn't seem like much money.
But what you may or may not be aware of is that this is relatively new money to townships. They've had the short end of the stick for a long time from their point of view, and it's only in the last couple of transportation bills where they've started to get this kind of dedicated funding. So they're actually relatively pleased with this position. It represents growth for them. And they now seem to be a regular player in the conversation, whereas before they were more or less left out. So
And
you're
so-
right, you're right, but they actually view this as progress.
Right, and we've got a lot of aging infrastructure out in those townships, especially as farm implements have developed, much larger, grain trucks, beet trucks, dairy trucks. Everything seems to be bigger. We got failing culverts and things like that, and so, yeah, that money's well needed. Thank you.
Yeah. The other thing I might add to that, Commissioner, is going back to that $30 million in the overall bridge funding, the process that's used, and counties have input on it, oftentimes has led to some of those dollars being allocated to township roads within counties. That hasn't gotten a lot of attention, but actually that is real money that sometimes is applied towards county roads also.
Commissioners and Mr. Chair, unless there's more questions, I would move to slide 11 and wrap up.
Just one comment. I don't.
Yeah, I'll just go on to, in the interest of time, to slide 11. I would say there was the legislature also put $30 million into a disaster contingency account to cover the local FEMA match for any natural disasters that might come along. That funding was flat out, so that's another good thing, just so that we're prepared for other emergencies. But so I just wanted to wrap up and give you a sense of, obviously, the state budget and economic tsunami that we're facing as we head into the 2021 session, and getting ourselves prepared for how that could and will impact discussions about counties, both across things like county program aid, human service costs, just all across the board, no doubt corrections and community safety. So those are all things we'll be being prepared for. But back in May, and let me just say that this has never happened before in 30 or 40 years that I'm aware of, where the state finance agency, in this case MMB, has come out with new budget projections other than their official state budget forecast. Well, they did so in May after the COVID crisis hit and the bottom started to fall out of the economy, both state and nationally. And so the expectation right now, as we sit here today, is that the state budget has about a $2.426 billion shortfall for the current biennium that we're in, that ends June 30th of 2020, pardon me. And so June 30th of 2021, sorry. And so then they more recently, before they completed their August bond sale, also re-estimated revenues and expenses for the 2022-23 biennium, which is the budget they will be setting when the new legislature comes back and is seated in January of this coming year in 2021. And that expectation is that there's at least a $4.7 billion shortfall. So the long and short of it is that we already know we face significant state budget shortfalls, and along the right-hand side, you'll see that I have some notes as to, we have every reason to believe that the situation is at least this bad for a couple of situations, but the one I want to highlight is that the projected growth in gross domestic product is actually lower now by economic estimates than the baseline that was used to project this $2.4 billion and $4.7 billion shortfall. So as you can see, there was an assumption there that the economy was contracting about 5.4%. The more recent numbers are 6.1%. There was an assumption that the economy would grow about 6.3% in 2021. That's been lowered to about 3.7%. All of those things suggest, at least, that the numbers here will be worse once we get an official state budget forecast completed in December of this year. So that's the situation. Obviously, a lot of challenges that will also play into non-general fund areas like monies for the gas tax money and sales tax monies that fund local roads and bridges through the CASA formula are also going to be challenged, as well as a number of other state budget accounts. So that's the scenario that we are preparing for. To end with the bad news, sorry about that, but we do hope to get the bonding bill passed. That would be a significant thing, both for helping the economy and for getting public infrastructure improvements that are just so desperately needed. And then we will deal with the 2021 session when we get there, and happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair.
Well, it's the budget situation.
The budget situation reminds me
The transition, we talked about this yesterday on a local radio station. Steve was part of this, and just so was Jeff. But the unallotment experience, the transition between the Ventura and the Paletti administration, where money that was promised to local governments was just plain canceled, you know. So some of us geezers have lived this before, but yeah, it's always an experience. Also, building on Mr. Novak's comments, I don't know about the long-term wisdom of this, but at least in my thinking, I think the 5G discussion really belongs in the transportation area because it has the development of that has significant implications on transportation needs. But that's a topic for another day, you know, more bourbon, I guess.
Well, Mr. Chair and members, I'm actually, I guess, a geezer. I was actually a staff person in the legislature when those unallotments happened. So the good news is that the state has a $2.4 billion general fund budget reserve, which is the largest that it has ever been. So there's reason to be hopeful that immediate sort of unallotments, if you will, like cuts in your current year allocations would be something that we would obviously resist strongly and would probably be unnecessary given the healthy budget reserves at this time. I think the conversation will be much more focused on what needs to happen as we set the next biennial budget for 22-23.
And Mr. Chair, Matt, I refuse to call myself a geezer, but having been through, I guess, on both the nonprofit side and legislative side with that, and having done a whole garden during digging up during Governor Paletti's unallotments, we at least do also have some reserves that we may have to tap into at some point. Concerned a little bit about, you know, the amount of, and this won't surprise you, Matt, unfunded mandates, as well as needed improvements that really get put back. I mean, obviously, since Lee brought up some of the transportation, you know, it's about the worst thing in the world is for us to be going to some of the most progressive ways to make sure our roads and bridges are okay. So we obviously, you know, our delegation supports getting this done. Caucus politics sometimes cannot be great about that, but hopefully they'll keep working on it. And then I know Carly didn't get to talk about it, but the funds regarding probation, our community probation work continues to be really critical. It's hard talking about funds in this kind of a situation, but I'm going to say it anyways.
Yeah.
And if I can just add just a small piece to that, there was a lot of conversation about the probation funding and a lot of support for it. Like, it was very, very close. I'm pretty sure if it wasn't for COVID that, I mean, you can never be sure with the legislature, but we were pretty close to getting it passed. And I think next year there will be a push to reevaluate that funding stream and how it works on a system-wide basis. There will be a number of organizations looking at finding a more equitable way to distribute that money.
And I guess for our constituents, just want to reinforce, I know you know this, Carly, I mean, our folks are doing some really great, innovative, creative improvements and cost-saving things, but appreciate pushing for that. It makes a difference. So thank you.
The only thing that I would add relative to the impacts here on local government is we are in historic times in terms of low interest rates, and it may come to pass. I haven't heard broad discussion or really any discussion by local folks about using borrowing as a tool to get through this. May come to pass we have to do this. Bonding right now should be part of the solution to eliminate what would you call it, the dips and valleys and so forth of revenue streams. So yeah, I don't hear this mentioned. I have brought this up at MICA meetings, and the discussion tends to just die there. I'm the only one that talks about it. But anyway, borrowing is part of the solution. It works in the private sector. It'll work here.
Well, Mr. Chair, thank you for all of your time. We appreciate the opportunity always to present directly and engage with the county boards. On your last comment, I would just, I think that is really an important point, that despite all of this economic bad news, there's a ton of, literally a ton, if you think of all of the work that needs to be done, of reasons why this bonding bill needs to happen and why it makes sense, both to promote the job creation, to get the infrastructure improvements that are needed, and to spread those costs out over 15 or 20 years at historically low interest rates. The bonds that the state just sold in August were at a historically low interest rate. It may have actually been a cost savings to the state. They reissued some bonds that had been previously sold and saved the state a bunch of money. So just an incredibly sensible time to be doing this work as well. So I think point well taken.
One last thing for you, Matt. How's this working out
For you? Was this the thing to do?
I didn't quite hear all of that, Mr. Chair.
Oh. My point is that
I wasn't part of the hiring
process when you came along, but coming on board with MICA, has this worked out for you?
Oh, yes. Thank you.
We're pretty fired up to have you.
And Mr. Chair, I have to apologize. You were cutting out a little bit and maybe it was on my end. But I'm going to say that I am enjoying my time working with all of you and love being here in this role.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, just I guess just thank all of you for the ongoing work. I'm not sure that in general people can really appreciate how much additional work this must be, continuing to have special sessions every month and having to bring up things that there's largely a lot of support, but not necessarily the will. And I recognize that means vacations, any making up for time during session, that's all gone by the wayside. So thank you all for your diligence. And Matt, your background with really being able to do the deep dive on a number of the financial and economic pieces are serving us well.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Is my button on? So thank you, MICA folks, and we'll move on. I'm sure this isn't the last time you got to do this today, so onward and upward. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next item is a public hearing.
Public hearing, and Shelley and Angie, could you bring us up to speed on what we need to know for this public hearing?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Environmental Services Director. On packet page 118 is where the agenda item starts for the public hearing. On July 21st, the board decided to hold its own public hearing on this matter, and I will let Angie Berg start that process for you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Angie Berg, Environmental Services. The first item on your agenda is to consider a public hearing for a conditional use permit submitted for a solar garden for Rena Solar Power Minneapolis on behalf of Michael Stamer, Wilmer, Minnesota. The proposal is to construct a 1 megawatt solar garden in the A80 zoning district. The property is located in section 27, Zion Township. The Stearns County Planning Commission held a public hearing on July 16th, 2020, and unanimously recommended denial of this application. The findings of fact for their decision are laid out on packet page 118 and 119. Mr. Chair, would you like me to go through those or just reference them?
What's the desire of my esteemed colleagues? Do you want her to go through those?
Mr. Chair, you were muted. We didn't hear that.
Go ahead and go through them.
Go offer us some detail, okay?
Okay, Mr. Chair. So the Planning Commission discussed that the proposal is consistent with the solar energy performance standards and the fact that solar farms are allowed as a CUP in the agricultural 80 zoning district. They indicated that the proposal may not be compatible with the present and future land uses in the area, that the proposal is located on prime farmland, and the land evaluation site assessment score is 80.81. There were concerns with the impact to the wetland from the proposed solar garden. Fencing the solar garden may hinder wildlife use and movement in the area. The proposal will have minimum impact to public health, safety, and traffic generations. And the proposal does not conform to the Stearns County Comprehensive Plan as sustaining agriculture as the desirable land use for the long term and maintaining and strengthening an economic diversity. The Planning Commission indicated the proposal will have a minimum impact to public services and that the financial guarantee would be required for decommissioning. Lastly, they believe that the precedence has been set for approving solar gardens in Stearns County. However, there are unique circumstances with this property which make it difficult to site a solar garden here. With that, Mr. Chair, this is a public hearing. The applicants are online, and I did receive one letter, which I forwarded to you this morning from our chair of our Planning Commission, Jeff Bertram. So when you're ready, I can read that into the record.
I'd say go ahead, Angie.
Mr. Chair, we didn't do that. It was on mute again.
Okay. Go ahead and read that into the record, Angie.
Okay, the email was sent from Jeff Bertram to the Stearns County Planning Commission. In the spirit of continuing the open dialogue about solar applications I'd like to share some thoughts on this application. For the record, only 5 of the 22 projects identified in an earlier email has a LISA score higher than 80. Counties such as McLeod use the NRCS prime farmland definition to deny solar projects solely on productive farmland potential, so that factor alone is not uncommon in denying applications and meets the legal standard of denial. It doesn't matter if 5 other projects in the past were approved. There were other factors involved as well. We're more informed and concerned now, at least we should be, with the number of solar applications. There are 9 connected to the Painesville substation alone. As an example, we have also used to have much lower decommissioning standards, and we corrected that condition as we became better informed. There is no secret that several Planning Commission members feel we have some potential future issues with over permitting too many solar farms, especially in one area like Painesville. Will we ever admit that too many, all in one area, may create other long-term issues? We have over 90 past, current, future projects in Stearns County. The next closest county has 35 plus. Board members have said in the past that it's because we are a larger county. There are much larger counties than Stearns. Other comments from board members during past meetings were, state is working on issues, something is going to happen anyway, damned if we do, damned if we don't.
No.
May not be the futuristic perspective. We need to minimize the adverse effects of too many projects, at least in one area. Planning Commission members who have been supportive of past applications had strong opinions this application was not a good fit, largely because of the impact to the wetlands and wildlife, along with a high Lisa score. The minutes will reflect this reality. That is why it was a unanimous recommendation to the county board to deny the application. The majority of the discussion was related to the huge effect on the wetland that the project would be constructed in, and the effects of the fencing to that wetland habitat. The high productivity was a strong secondary concern. One member summed it up best in saying it was the perfect storm of the realities of where the project was proposed and saying it should not be approved. Lastly, Mr. Bertram attached notes from a statewide working group and also a newspaper article on one of the several projects that were denied in McLeod County. The last statement is the Planning Commission has dealt with this and many other applications in depth, and we ask the county board to take our more in-depth work and unanimous recommendation for denial to heart. Thank you. Mr. Chair, that is the only public testimony we received, and my understanding is we do not have anyone on the line for public testimony other than the applicants.
With the applicant, this is a public hearing, so I guess we could give the applicant an opportunity to speak. Is that all right with fellow board members?
Yep. Do we need to open the public hearing then, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. You may have already opened it and I just couldn't hear you.
How
How about yes?
Yeah, can you hear me? This is Michael.
Okay, Mike.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yep.
We can hear you. Michael?
Yeah, this is Michael Stamer. I guess I'd like to have Cindy start, and then that when she's completed, then I'd like to make a small statement.
Hi, this is Cindy Larson O'Neill. I'm project manager for Renesola Power in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We also have on the line Hal Galvin, and he is the North American Development Manager and can also comment on this project. Hal has worked for decades in solar and so can address any questions that I can't. I would like to just briefly review the letter that we submitted to the county commissioners, and it's basically a list of our arguments that rebut the arguments that have been put forth by the Planning Commission and the commissioners. I do thank you for your time today and appreciate your willingness to let us go through these items. First item is that we believe we've had conformance with all the published requirements. So Renesola acted in good faith in exploring the development project at this location. We worked with the local jurisdiction administration all the way through the process, and no red flags were identified to us. We have put some significant money into this project so far, including paying for a wetland delineation and an erosion control plan, not to mention our staff time. We would have not moved forward with this project had we known that these other items would have come up later as issues. As far as the prime ag land, we do believe that there's a limited impact to the prime ag land. As you may recall, this solar site is basically a triangle shape in the very corner, the southeast corner of Mike Stamer's property, and a small portion of it, in fact 1.9% of the 160 acres is actually on the cropland, which is what you're identifying as the prime ag land. The other part is on wetlands. And I did also want to notice that I have mentioned that I have done additional research. And according to the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources and also the Department of Natural Resources commercial solar siting guidelines, we are allowed to build in the wetlands. And in fact, the impact to the wetlands is negligible. So I can submit those two documents to you, but that basically says that they don't see any concern, and as a matter of fact, according to those two documents, the solar garden and the development and in that corner on the wetlands would actually enhance the soil and the water and the wildlife. So I just wanted to point that out. That's contrary to what the Planning Commission and the board is claiming. So I guess that kind of rolls into the next point, which is the long-term preservation and enhancement of the ag land. We've talked to many landowners who have come up against this type of an issue, and the argument that they use there is that they could actually, when the crop prices are so low for reimbursement, they can put their land into the Conservation Preservation Act and get a higher reimbursement from their land that they're getting now. So this is a similar type of a scenario where you're resting just a piece of that land, and it will be enhanced by the pollinator blend grasses that will go underneath there. And in truth, when the solar system is decommissioned, the agricultural land should be better condition than it was before, and in theory would have a higher LISA score, looking at both the A and the B horizon of that soil level. So what we're proposing and what we would say is that, you know, we are actually restoring the land and making it better than it was, increasing the LISA score to that land. We do have proper decommissioning in place that we've submitted that document, and I think everybody's had time to review that, so I don't know if that's an issue, but we can discuss that further if you'd like. Previous solar projects that have been approved, I know I looked at the LISA score connected to all the solar projects, and I know one of them at least had a higher LISA score than we do. But again, I feel like that's not relevant in the fact that we are only using such a small portion of the ag land, and we would be amending the soil. Renesola has a very strong record of conservation and environmental commitment, and we do pride ourselves in working with the local jurisdictions to address any issues, and our goal is to make sites, you know, better than they were prior. So we feel real strongly about that, and we would, of course, follow the solar pollinator assessment that Stearns County has put into place as well. As far as diversification and economic opportunity for the landowner, I've looked through your 2030 comprehensive plan, and to rebut what you've got listed in here as that it doesn't meet your comprehensive plan in these different areas, I do think that you could make the argument that this is a good thing for the landowner in terms of economic diversification, and that his right to use a very small portion of his land to bring in a different type of income to him is his right and is a good thing to do. And it just is encouraging economic diversity in Stearns County, like the Conservation Reserve Program is allowed to do. I think I'll leave it there. I may have some other comments to jump in. And let me hand it over to Hal and see if he has any comments.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy.
Any other comments?
Yeah, can I, am I audible? Can anybody hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Cindy. I think you did a good job of articulating our position. There was only one element of the denial for our permit that was mentioned in the letter that was read, and that had to do with fencing the wetland area and perhaps impacting local wildlife. I think there might be ways to mitigate this, including just raising the level of the fence off the ground by 6 inches to permit, smaller creatures that are native to the wetland to have the ability to get in and out without too much trouble. We've done this before. And I don't think that the wetland habitat is a habitat for larger animals than that. So that might be one way to mitigate that concern. But I totally agree with Cindy. We're only using the land for 25 years. That's the extent of our interconnection agreement with Xcel Energy, the extent of our agreement with the people that benefit from buying the energy and saving some money on their electric bill every month. And when we return the land to its original state, the land will be better than it is now. It won't be subjected to fertilizer. I think it'll generate its own new organic matter, and it'll have a time to rest, and it will be restored to its original condition. So that's all I have to add. I, again, to mirror Cindy's comments, thank you for considering this. I realize it was an extraordinary request for the board to take this off the consent agenda, and I hope we've made a good enough case to have you perhaps reconsider. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for...
Hi, Cindy, Michael, if you don't mind, I'd like to just give a little bit of enhancement to what Hal just mentioned. According to the DNR, this section of wetlands is not a large block habitat. A large block habitat would be greater than 40 acres. And so according to the DNR, there would be absolutely minimum impact to the wildlife. That said, they do have a commercial solar siting guideline that we would be happy to follow. They have good recommendations in there and detail about wildlife and the travel corridors. This scenario does not follow that. It is not a wildlife corridor. However, they do suggest things like non-barbed wire. In case a deer wants to jump over, they recommend to have at least an 8-foot fence. So it would prevent deer from jumping over. They list things, for example, like wildlife-friendly erosion control, recommendations in terms of like biodegradable material and so forth. So we would be able to follow the best practice guidelines put out by the DNR regarding solar garden fencing and everything that goes along with that, impacting the habitat. Thank you. I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you guys hear me? This is Michael.
Michael?
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, again, this is Michael Stamer. First and foremost, I'm not a political speaker, so you'll have to bear with me a little bit here. But, yeah, I think Cindy and Hale made some good points. I think the one big hang-up, it seems like, is they're all tied up on that LISA score of being 80. Well, that's for the whole 160 acres. 6 acres of that 6.1 of that 8 acres we haven't farmed for numerous years because of the wet growing seasons we've been having the last few years. If any of you guys are farmers, you'll understand the wet seasons the last 5 years. So really, we're only using, 1.9 of the tillable ground there. But the average LISA score on them 8 acres is going to be considerably less than the rest of the farm. They're using the LISA score on the whole 160, which isn't fair and equitable. And, like I say, I'm a farmer, live in Wilmer. I farm in, 6, 8 different counties. But, in Stearns County, I've paid over $1 million in real estate taxes the last 8 years to Stearns County Treasurer up there, $1 million. And so now I'm trying to put less than 0.5% of my acreage that I own in Stearns County into a solar garden, and I'm being declined. I don't know that that's a real healthy business climate for anybody that's in Stearns County, whether a farmer or a commercial business person, that they want to diversify their income and actually increase their income. The only way you get more money in the kettle is you got to generate more money to spread it out amongst the people and the businesses in the community. If the money's going downhill every year, it's hard to have more money for all these different projects. And so that's the hard part that I see, that I think it is a value-added business that we're trying to do and diversify our business. And it seems like the planning and zoning are kind of hung up on that LISA score, which is an incorrect score. That's not even close to accurate for those 8 acres. I guess basically that's about it. But in the ending, I do want to thank the board members that come forward and helped us get this rescheduled for this hearing today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Lee, you're muted.
All right. Can you hear me now?
What's that?
Commissioner Lenzmeyer, you are muted.
All right.
There you go.
Okay. Any other public comments? If not, we'll close the public hearing. Anything else?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Based on what Mr. Stammer was just talking about with the LISA scores, et cetera, I'm wondering if it would be okay with you if we had Ms. Benson just walk us through, just review the delineation information and the LISA score. I mean, what he brought up was a question I had.
Would it be appropriate to close the public hearing for that discussion?
Yes, I thought you just did that.
Okay. All right. Public hearing closed. Go ahead. Have that. Want to point that out? Have that brief explanation.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Clark, in further review of the LISA score and a smaller area, what we found is that it actually didn't change significantly, but then I reviewed the soils and found that there's a soil inclusion that wasn't listed in the LISA score. So the area, that corner that's being discussed wasn't actually, or doesn't actually show up on the survey. So that hydric soil was not accounted for in the LISA score. So if you look at packet page 176, you're going to see it's called W01. That is a type 1 wetland. And that wetland, I think, that's the soil area that did not show up on the review of the smaller area for that's the hydric soil. If that would have shown up and we would have been able to assign a name, the LISA score would have gone down. We don't really want to mess around with the land evaluation portion. So we take that soil information as presented. But what we have to remember is that the LISA score is a tool. So as looking at it as a tool, we have other pieces that we have to look at. And it was indicated earlier, that is also something that you can consider. Mike, for putting that up, wetland area in the bottom right-hand corner shows that is a type 1 It's also considered a pedestrian emergent vegetation, and it's also called a type 1, so it is farmed on a regular non-wet season. You can also see where the center pivot irrigation does hit, and you can see that this corner is an area that would be outside of that center pivot for the most part. So when you consider that the Wetland Conservation Act does allow for the use of type 1 wetlands, and in this case would be considered no loss, which is an allowance within the system, either for farming or other practices that don't drain or fill a wetland, then this would be an allowed use or considered a no loss use in the area. So I hope that explains it a little bit. Packet page 177 also shows that area and how the layout you can see is about maybe a fourth, maybe a third of the area for the solar garden. So you can see that you're allowed to place solar, essentially posts into the ground in that area, and it doesn't impede how the water flows. That's why it's considered a no loss. So if there are any additional questions, I can certainly do my best to answer them.
Any other questions by board members?
Thank you, that helped.
If not,
Is there,
You keep muting.
can you hear me?
wonder what the issue is here. Does the board wish to take action on this item at this time? If not, do you want to table it? What's the board's pleasure?
Well, Mr. Chair, a couple of I guess I'd make a motion to approve it, and then I can make some comments if we get a second. Or I can get comments first and then make a motion.
Let's get the comments in, Steve. Go ahead.
Okay, one of the issues, in our comp plan from 2030, was economic diversity, which I think, this would allow, not only for the farmer, but, and Randy can maybe verify this, but the township would also receive some production tax credit monies from the solar array, because it's like solar and wind. I think the county and the townships do receive some tax monies back.
That's correct, Steve. Yep, the county and the township will get some energy tax. Yes.
Okay, so there's a little win for Zion Township. The wetland issue, I think it sounds like they've agreed to make some changes if necessary. So I guess I don't see that as an issue, because if it is a type 1, they could technically disc it under and there would be really no wildlife area there if it was dry enough. And I think there's such a minor impact to the actual tillable land that, in the long run, it's a minuscule effect. And then in the second, or my last comment is, the letter that included the McLeod County article, I think the second last paragraph kind of sums it up, where he states, I have reservations on all these solar gardens, but we have a good staff that wrote up some pretty good qualifications. And I hate to get in the way of a willing seller and a willing buyer. I think, a number of years ago, we had that, committee that kind of went through and established our initial solar, requirements. And I think as we've gone along here, we've developed this into a more fine-tuned machine. Yeah, it seems kind of ironic that Paynesville area seems to, get a lot of requests. I don't know if the interconnection with XL is just greater there, that's occurring, but those would be my comments.
Well, what drives, just my perspective, what drives the location of these projects is highway proximity and transfer station proximity. I don't know what other location factors there are, but I know that's the two biggies. The transportation is for the construction and maintenance. Then transfer station is somewhere for the juice to go. So, Shelley, are there any other factors that dictate the location of these projects?
I think it's the substation and knowing how much interconnection would be allowed, but we're not allowed to get that information as to capacity they have.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure. I've got a couple things to add. Sitting on the Planning Commission and listening to the discussion there, again, it happened to be that this was the first time we ever had a unanimous vote to deny. A couple things to respond to. First of all, Randy, you're available here. Is that with these use of the wetland, these wetlands are often taxed at the very lowest level of county tax because they're promoted as unproductive or wasteland. Once you put a solar garden on that, that's no longer true because a tremendous amount of income, of course, is generated from that solar garden compared perhaps to just sitting there as wasteland. So the status of that property doesn't change even when they put the solar garden there. So you're getting a lot of productivity, but you're not being taxed appropriately perhaps for the use of that land. The other thing about the wetland being small and minute is that we do have these large tracts of land that have crops. But once those crops are taken off that ground, and once the snow flies, there's very little habitat for birds, small mammals, and nesting areas. And so these small pieces are concentrated oftentimes with wildlife, and of course then you're taking that away. So again, the Planning Commission was at a position where they said enough is enough. We want to start preserving these wetlands, and we're going to also take a look at what the impact of the solar gardens are. And of course we talked about the disposal of the panels as well being an issue.
Terrell has a comment.
Thank you. Yeah, for a second there, I had trouble unmuting. Shelley, thank you for helping with that. It sounds like there's a couple of pieces of information that are different than what were in front of the Planning Commission, both in terms of the LISA score, which seems like that was a piece of it. And it's really good that we're looking at LISA scores, but I would hope that we can make sure that both they and us are getting the information that relates to the area in question. And then the willingness to be making sure that the wildlife is able to get in, that is there, I think is important. The pollinators doing some of that vegetation is important. I think the board members know I care deeply about the environment. I also am a little confused, besides enough is enough, why saying we would potentially say no to the next landowner, the next property owner. We have, even within our newest update to our comprehensive plan, we're trying to figure out how to be doing balancing and making sure that economics are a part, diversification for ag, given where it's cited, it makes sense. We have not gone back and said no. We know the state and us are looking at ways to make sure that when the useful life is done, that the appropriate responses are, that the actions are taken care of. So I would, unless somebody else wants to, I would certainly second Steve's motion when you get to it.
All righty, I'll hold that thought. Joe indirectly touched on something I want to see on a future agenda. I'd like to hear from Jeff Johnson on how these things are taxed, and that would be insightful for any discussion.
I agree, that'd be really good.
Yep, so not to confuse the issue any further, can we agree that there is a motion and a second on the table on this matter for approval?
Yes.
Okay.
Do we want to hear from Randy at all on Joe's question about tax now, or do we want to discuss that later? I know Randy's
Later, because I had a brief discussion, but it was in a social situation with Jeff on this, and he told, what is that play? Anyway, the discussion is that is a moving target, but he has an idea of where this will ultimately go. I'd say we consider the matter at hand and vote either up or down, and we'll go from there. So without further ado, we got a motion and a second to approve this application. All those in favor say aye, and I'll go through this by district. District 1.
Aye.
District 2.
Nay.
District 3.
Aye.
District 4. Nay. District 5.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-2. That's how county government works. So anyway, well, that was easy.
Mr. Chair, if the applicants are still present, if they move forward with that fence, I'd like to see if they can raise that just to see how that would work. It would be interesting to see if that makes a difference for bird nesting.
That might be, I would say that maybe that might be a future staff function. I think yeah, we'll do this on a staff level in the future when we get a break in the action here. How's that? I think it's Joe. Here's where our perspectives are different. I think you want this on a property specific perspective. I want to see it more on an area wide, maybe county wide impact on that. Is that okay with you, Joe? Ooh, scary. We agree.
And Mr. Chair, I'd be interested in that as well.
All righty. Well, Charlie.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, we will have that discussion and bring back information in relation to wildlife habitat and maybe some of the DNR standards to understand them as a larger discussion item. But we would like to propose bringing the findings, board's findings of fact back to you at your next meeting.
Hey, standard procedure.
And Mr. Chair, if the applicant, if they, that Renee Sola, could include, she's mentioned she had some documents that they had gotten in regards to habitat and stuff like that. If it's possible, they could include them, or send them to the county, as additional information.
Did you hear that? Is that realistic? I think it sounds like a reasonable request.
Hi, this is Cindy. I can surely share those, email those in. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that was easy. Moving along to then environmental services. We have a rezoning request. Shelley, you want to walk us through that?
Mr. Chair, I will have Angie Berg walk you through that. She has got all of those ready to go.
Angie, take it away.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, so the next 3 items are rezonings that were heard by the Planning Commission at their last meeting. The first one is item number E1, and it's to consider the Planning Commission's approval of a rezoning submitted by Charles and Leah Buddy of Faribault, Minnesota, and enact ordinance number 605. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of this request. It is for approximately 6 acres to be rezoned from residential 10 to residential 5, located in section 19 of Painesville Township. The Planning Commission's findings of fact were emailed to you on Friday in your decision memo. So if the board is so inclined to concur with the Planning Commission, it would be to enact ordinance number 605.
Okay. Any discussion by board members? If not, this isn't a public hearing, and unless you want to call for one, a motion to approve be appropriate.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Jeff. Do we have a second?
Second, Persky.
All righty. Motion's been made and seconded. There's no further discussion. All those in favor say aye. District 1.
Aye.
District 2. District 3.
Aye.
District 4. Aye. Steve. District 5.
Aye.
Hey. Progress. Next item, Jacob Hay request.
Next item is item number E2, and this is submitted by Jacob Hay of IPS Solar on behalf of Brian and Carolyn Cash of Paynesville. The Planning Commission held this public hearing last Thursday and made a recommendation to approve the rezoning. The vote on this one, let me confirm, was a 4-2 vote to recommend approval.
All right.
This property.
Go ahead.
The property is approximately 18 acres. The zoning district is currently transitional 20. The request is to rezone it to agricultural 40. The applicants have indicated that they would intend to follow up with a conditional use permit for a solar garden. So if the board is inclined to concur with the Planning Commission, you would be looking at enacting ordinance number 606.
Okay. What's the board's pleasure? If you want it approved, go ahead. A motion to approve would be in order.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, just real quickly, again, this is a T20, and this is a request just to rezone. It's not for the related necessarily to the solar garden. That's why it did pass 4-2. So the Planning Commission was supportive of the change in the zoning.
So why did they vote then 4-2?
Because it was just a change in the zoning, not necessarily approving the solar garden, but they did approve the change in the land use.
To follow up on that, the 2 no's, what was their reason? Was it because they thought there might be a solar garden? Or was it for some other reason?
Commissioner Clark, yeah, I would suppose that. Yeah, I would think that's probably why.
And then just to clarify, I mean, again, we got positive input in our plan. We did not have negative input in our plan about solar gardens. So I understand there remains some pretty strong, maybe differences within the Planning Commission and perhaps maybe even with what we now have in our plan, but just to have said it. Okay,
Yeah.
that's helpful.
And Commissioner Clark, we should maybe have that discussion, maybe jointly about a number of issues, perhaps with the Planning Commission.
Yeah, I'm not
However,
sure whether we need to have a meeting with the Planning Commission. I don't know that that's needed at all. I'm just saying I know that we probably will continue to see split votes on things that could lead to a solar garden. That was all.
One other thing to comment, with this change though, we do not see too many properties being T20. I think that was an older identification or zoning potential. And so the development credit would actually be reduced or lost by switching it over to Ag 40.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second on approving this. Any further comments? If not, all those in favor say aye. District 1?
Aye.
District 2?
Aye.
3? District 4, me, aye. And Steve?
Aye.
All right. Hey, progress. All right. The Madigan request?
The last rezoning is item number E3, and that's submitted by William and Julie Madigan of Eden Lake Township. The Planning Commission held this public hearing last week and unanimously recommended approval to rezone approximately 10 acres from the residential 10 to the residential 1 zoning district. Eden Lake Township did recommend approval of this request, as did the majority of the Planning Commission. So again, the recommended action, if you would support the Planning Commission's recommendation, is to approve ordinance number 607.
Okay, any comments on that? Questions, clarifications? If not, a motion to be amended.
I'll move to approve. Morgan.
Thank you, Jeff. A second on that? Do we have a second?
I will second that and just comment, it makes a lot of sense. There won't be excess development, even though it's an R1. There's not room for a lot of places.
Okay, any other comments? If not, all those in favor say aye. District 1? District 2?
Aye.
District 3?
Aye.
4? Aye. Steve?
Aye.
All right. Wow, okay. And then the last item in the environmental services section is the Big Fish Lake Association discussion. Shelley or Angie, you want to give us some background on this?
Mr. Chair, I think I'll let Angie, she has met with some of the representatives of the area that's being discussed, so I'll let her review that with you.
All righty, Angie, take it away.
After reviewing the Lake Association's email this morning, I think that a couple takeaways. So we're happy to attend a Lake Association meeting, and I can reach out to them and talk to them about that, scheduling that. Specific to Alexander Point and the recent development of properties out there, there's been concern with some recent violations on vegetative alterations. And so after we received the first violation, I did reach out to Cold Spring Granite Company and their attorney, their staff, to talk to them about how can we help them as a seller inform and educate buyers. So they brought their realtor into the conversation as well, and they agreed to, at closing, and we all know closings are different than they used to be, but to at closing present the information related to the county ordinance. And so they've committed to that. I have to believe they've been doing that over the last month or so since we had the conversation. So we're doing that specific to Alexander Point. Secondly, and we've talked about this before at the board, every year we send all new shoreland landowners a guide to living in Stearns County shoreland areas. And so that has our vegetative alteration requirements listed. We also do discuss that at our shoreline contractors training. So in the event the contractors involved, they would be informed as well. So, specific to the violations or violation that occurred on Big Fish Lake, we are aware of it. We issued them a restoration plan. They have elected to appeal that restoration plan, and that appeal pursuant to state laws to the County Board of Adjustment. And so if you're signed up for the Board of Adjustment meetings on demand, you'll see that likely next month, or I can certainly send it to all the commissioners. The other concern with one of the other lots on that development was excessive vegetative clearing. We found that there was not excessive vegetative clearing. There was some erosion occurring from some brush cutting, so we addressed that with the landowner. We continue to follow up on each and every violation or complaint that we receive, and we do take those very seriously and are certainly open to ideas that the Lake Association might have.
Okay, and they're aware of the function of the Board of Adjustment, the process and so forth, and what the opportunities and limitations are with such an action?
Mr. Chair, are you asking if the applicant or the Lake Association is aware of that? Both. So the Lake Association, typically we don't send notice on an appeal because it's an appeal of an administrative decision. But Shelley and I discussed it this morning. We will definitely be sending notice to the Lake Association and to a set of landowners. We'll have to figure out what distance because it's not set forth in statute. And then as to that addresses the Lake Association question. As to the applicants, are they aware of their options? Yes, they're aware. They've hired an attorney to help them through that appeal process. And we have given them documentation of the letters, the pictures, site visits, et cetera. So I do expect that application to come in shortly.
Okay, any other questions, comments, appropriate discussion of this? This doesn't call for action at this point. It's information only, but it's been certainly brought to our attention. Any other comments by board members or staff?
Mr. Chair, I just want to compliment staff. I appreciate their follow-up on this. You know, we have situations where we've got these ordinances in place, and those people that want to change their shoreline oftentimes will submit a plan and go through the appropriate channels. Yeah, but we have a situation here where people build, you know, $100,000s of dollars worth of real estate homes or cabins on a piece of shoreland, and then they put tens of thousands of dollars into landscaping, and they should know the rules rather than just willfully go ahead and clear cut. So I appreciate staff's effort to try to balance things out here.
Well, Joe, have you been involved in any of the, listening to any of those discussions? They tend to, with buyers that are remotely located from Stearns County, you get arguments like, well, we don't have to do that on Lake Minnetonka. So it gets to be a pretty interesting discussion. I don't have anything else. I don't know that staff, is there anything else we need to know about this for now?
I don't believe so, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Well, thank you for bringing this to our attention. I think it sounds like there's more to come on this later.
Hey, Mr. Chair, can we take a Zoom timeout?
Damn right. Zoom timeout. All right, timeout.
Thank you.
Hi, how's the audio?
Well, it's working right now, and I will not touch it.
So did you see what I had to do here with this? Why you had to hold the space bar? I unchecked that. Yeah, that's unchecked yet. Okay. It had this, I'm holding the space bar, and I unchecked. That was checked before, so that's not an issue. I didn't know, I asked Kelly, I didn't know if Kelly was trying to unmute you or mute you at the same time you were doing it, maybe? So I told Kelly, leave it to Lee. I said, it's one thing like now when we go to break and she mutes everybody, but I said otherwise during the meeting, let Lee mute and unmute his microphone. So hopefully that will happen. Do you know the difference? Do you know when it's red like that, that means you're muted?
Yeah.
So if you ever, and like, you know how you can see your little, do you see those little red, how that's crossed out there?
Yeah.
That means you're muted. So if you ever want to know when you're looking at yourself, if you see that red thing, then just hit this microphone to unmute. So if you just, I don't know if you just want to kind of keep it there, and that's what you have to do. If you see that that's red,
Leave it on unmute.
yeah, oops.
talking about fee changes.
Lee, I think you're muted.
Okay. How's that?
How's that?
There we go.
Okay. Randy, take it away.
Okay, so this year's fee schedule, we do approximately a fourth every year. This year we did the property services in the sheriff's department. Other departments are also given an opportunity to change fees at this time. The changes are summarized on your packet, page 247. Typically, we go into more depth at the public hearing. I know there was some questions on the sheriff's changes, and I think we have a budget meeting coming up that we'll talk about those more. But if the board has other questions or has concerns about those, we can go over those if you like, Mr. Chair. Other than that, we were looking to set a public hearing for September 8th to set the new fees.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just follow up on Randy. Yeah, we do have we started a couple of years ago having the budget committee review the fee changes, and the committee hasn't met yet, but we're scheduling that now, and we will have done that before you hold the public hearing and take action on the fees. So there could be some changes as a result of that. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes more sense than what we've done historically. And it was a process in the past that was really irrational in its process. So, yeah, we'd appreciate the input there, a little more substantiated recommendation based on, well, costs and so forth. An element of it being staff time, et cetera, but also appreciating that there's a general interest component in the various actions that we're involved in. So, yeah, it's a good way to do it. Put together a recommendation for us, and we'll get at it that way. So we need a motion to set a public hearing for this for the next meeting, correct?
Correct. Yes.
All righty. Do we have such a motion? Don't all talk at once.
I'll go ahead and I'll move that meeting.
I knew you wouldn't be able to stand. Thank you, Joe.
I'll second with a question.
All righty. What's your question, Jeff?
I noticed some places there's 1 cent. So I went through these. I was just maybe take a look at that. I don't know if that needs to be on there. You can see one.
Yeah, I think what happens is sometimes we'll get requests for a lot of data. So we'll charge 1 or 2 cents per data item, but there could be thousands of data items. So that's why it looks really small, but it does represent the cost that we're trying to.
And back in the old days, we had a per page fee, but I would imagine now with electronic transfers, that should be, well, on one hand, it should be easier, on the other hand, they ask for more data. So I don't know what the appropriate action is. That'll be up to the committee to handle that, I think.
I thought maybe it was an oversight or something that was on there.
No,
We might make a mistake. We might make a mistake, but Randy would, no.
And I appreciate the work that the departments are doing on this. It's really important. And I'm glad the budget committee will be reviewing. There's some proposed increases in some fees that could have a pretty significant unintended consequence. So it'll be good to see what you all are thinking and what the recommendation is coming back.
Okay, I think we need a vote for the public hearing at the next meeting. All those in favor say aye. District 1? 2?
Aye.
3? And he said aye. I saw him. District 4? Aye. District 5?
Aye.
All right. Okay. Administration. Take it away, Dr. Willie. Or Steve.
Which item would you like us to start with, Mr. Chair? The additional, the CARES Act, or the airport?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay, well, let's do the airport appointments, the appointments to the Regional Airport Authority Commission first. Then the ad hoc committee met yesterday, and if you recall, that's an elected official from each of the 4 entities and the respective administrator for each of the 4 entities. And there's been quite a few appointments made at this time, but there's still a couple appointments, particularly by Sherburne and by ourselves, that still need to be made. Actually, the city of St. Cloud needs to occur, but we know who is going to be recommended there. So, and that was sent to you, as you can see. Benton County appointed Kurt Hunziger, who is currently the mayor of Sauk Rapids and also works with U.S. Bank, and John Quaid, the president of Knife River. Sherburne County appointed Jamie Bestian, who has been involved with the airport in getting the commercial air service to the regional airport for quite some time. And then they've made a recommendation to the rest of the group that Brian Myers be appointed as the at-large appointment. Now, if there's not agreement on that, I suspect that they'll appoint Brian as their representative. The city of St. Cloud has appointed King Banyan, who is a dean at St. Cloud State University and former legislator, and Ryan Daniel, who is the St. Cloud Metrobus executive director, who also has some aviation experience himself. And then, as you know, you appointed Marshall Grams, who is a resident of Sartell. He's a financial advisor, and then he's also a pilot in the National Guard. And so he spends a lot of time at the airport. So hopefully the Stearns County Board can make an appointment today, and Sherburne will take some action. Then the ad hoc committee will meet again in early October to talk about an at-large appointment and come back to the various boards and the council about that. So, and if you recall, we had a top 4 that was the result of your ranking, and that would really leaves 2 there, that David Weirs and Robert Strack, because one of our top 4 was Ryan Daniel, who will be appointed by the city of St. Cloud. So with that, hopefully that's enough information that our board can move ahead today, or at the latest at your next meeting, to make that appointment.
Cheryl.
Okay, thank you. So I know this has been a very interesting process. It makes it a little challenging, I think, for us and even for people interested, because obviously trying to figure out the real needs of that board and composition with so many factors weighing in. Mike, or Lee, you might want to address this. My understanding is there really is some interest in having somebody from SCTCC on it, whether that would be President Cheek, who has not been talked to, or another possibility would be Lori Clues, who's the CFO, who lives, I believe, in Jeff's district, who also used to work for the state auditor's office and is pretty involved in business, but nobody's talked to them yet. And so as much as I like Brian Myers, I don't know, how that reflects like our decision. The people that we have on there, we had a lot of great people coming forward. If we are not attempting to do something with an SCTCC pick as one of our people, the only thing then left would be for that to be an at-large. But of our folks, Bob Strack would make a lot of sense, given what his background and relationships and interest in growing the airport are. So I'm going to throw my 2 cents in on the second part, if we're going to do that. But how sincere is the group about wanting somebody from SCTCC?
This is Jeff Mergen. I would like to make a case for Daniel Fouchette. If you look at the point totals, he's only 1 behind David Weirs and 2 behind Robert Strack. And he has excellent aviation background, business background. He speaks locally across the state on aviation safety and aviation law. So I'd like to make a case for him either in our appointment or else our recommendation for a at-large candidate.
The good news is I don't see how we can screw this up. We got some good folks here, and the only point that I want us to consider at some future meeting is we got an awful lot of qualified folks here. I'd like to figure out a way to keep them involved. I mean, obviously we can only appoint one person today, but yeah, there's some real quality in that group. Anybody else want to
Could one of you just
make a
speak to
case for any other?
is the desire really to have somebody on there who has the ability to be impacting programs? That's the question I have. How serious is the ad hoc group about that? Which means SBTCC in this case.
Yeah. If I have a bias, it's for somebody with significant corporate background. But beyond that, I don't attach that. I'm not attaching that to a name right now.
Okay.
Steve, you were indicating you had something to say? First to Steve.
No, I didn't.
You just waving at me? Hi,
I'm
Steve.
just consumed. Well, yes.
All righty. Okay.
All right, I would support David Weir's, just that he had 4 people that had put him on our list, so that just makes 4 supporters.
But my concern with that, in all honesty, is it's duplicative to some extent of our appointment already. We didn't make an appointment with somebody with significant corporate background and relationships. And that's something Bob brings to the table. That's not against Dave in any way, but we have not yet made an appointment that actually fits with what they're looking at. Although I think Marshall's going to add a lot. So I was going to move Bob.
Well, go ahead and move, Bob.
All right, I move Bob Strack.
Okay, is there a second? Is there a second? Third call. I'll second that, and we can have a vote, and if it doesn't, Bob isn't approved, then we gotta go down the list. So, all those in favor say aye. District 1?
Aye.
District 2?
Nay.
District 3?
3?
Nay.
District 4? Aye. District 5?
I don't know. No,
How about if we go and interview then? Maybe that's what we need to do.
I'd like to see, the only point I'd make is, let's make a choice today. I attended the meeting yesterday, and I want this process to keep moving forward.
Okay, I'll vote nay.
Okay, all right. That Bob Strack's failed then. Somebody want to make a motion for somebody else? Let's just keep going down the line until we get somebody.
Mr. Chair, I'd nominate Dave Weirs.
Okay, do we have a second for that?
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. District 1?
Nay.
District 2?
Aye.
District 3?
I don't know. I'll go with aye.
All right. District 4? Aye. District 5?
Aye.
Okay, we got one.
So, Mr. Chair and members, just really quick, I think we've got 2 excellent human beings that don't necessarily reflect what this group was looking for. So I think as we go forward, it's really important that we remember what the criteria is. The other thing I've got to say is there's going to be one woman on here, and it's hard for me to believe that we can't even come up with a significantly good person who's really well qualified, and I could probably give you 15 right now, to be on there. So it's going to be yet another board that we have significant impact, that we have not made any effort really to try to think about that as we move forward. So as we come up to other appointments, I'd like to encourage us to stretch and do some recruitment with that.
Good plan. All right. Anything else?
I would also like to keep Daniel Frechette on board here as far as a possibility.
Okay. Anything else? You know, I mean, if you'd have told me when this whole process started, we get 28 applicants, I'd have sent you to AA, but we were blessed with a plethora of qualified applicants. That means a lot. Okay, anything else? All right, but let's figure out a way to get others involved. I'll keep coming back to that point. There's obviously a lot of interest in this. Okay, back to Dr. Willie. What was your other item? The CARES Act?
Yes, sir. I'll get right to that. Well, I think you can see that and can still hear me. As you know, the phase 2 of our CARES Act plan was to mostly communicate with the school districts and find if there was any gaps in funding for the school district. So we've done that. Our team has done that. And hold on just a second. There you go. So in phase 1, as you know, you allocated $5 million to the Small Business and Nonprofit Relief Grant Program. And as of today, we have 54 applications that are within the city of St. Cloud. They're administering that, and 80 applications throughout the rest of the county. So there's a fair amount of interest, but not as much as we thought there would be. And also we have our total exposure right now, if we can look at it that way, is well under $1 million at this point. And so and we originally advertised to close the application period this Friday. So we will get more applications, but we're confident. And from looking at the applications, we also see that there are some businesses that definitely have costs that are above the $7,500. And so going back to this phase 1, what we are recommending to the board is that we raise the amount that businesses and nonprofits can qualify for to $15,000, and then extend the deadline to submit by a couple of weeks until September 18th. And that'll give us time to communicate the changes in the plan, even to those that have already applied. And so that's where we are today, and we're just getting the program up for families and individuals as we speak. And we won't spend near $500,000 in the small city application with the small city eligible costs either. So we're sitting pretty well with our $19.3 million at this point. And so we've talked about phase 2. As I said, we have been in conversation with the school districts, with the public school districts. We requested that they send us their costs that were eligible and they had not received any funding for, and so we received all of that. What we're seeing there is we did it with the 10 public school districts. What we're hearing from them is there's PPE requests and things to take temperatures and of course plexiglass and cleaning things, much like the county has spent money on. And again, similar to everybody else, tools and software so they can do meetings remotely. and hardware for staff and for students for the distance learning. So we tallied all those up, and we think that we can meet. And then even as we were making these tallies late last week or early this week, we learned that the schools actually got another amount of money, and so we retooled this even up until yesterday. But we think that if we allocate at this point $3 million, we can meet a lot of those needs for those 10 districts that reported to us, and in addition, the private schools as well. And so rather than come up with an amount based on their eligible costs, we would allocate, we're suggesting that we would allocate $3 million and then spread that out on a per pupil basis. So it works out to be $106 per student. Schools will still need to demonstrate their costs are eligible, but their cap would be based on this formula of number of pupils and a total of $3 million. And so, as I said here, really what we're looking for is the board to approve allocating the $3 million to the 10 school districts and all the other private schools. And the schools will still need to report to us that their costs are eligible. And so we'll make sure that that our agreements with the schools cover future audits should they occur, so we don't have anybody having to pay back any dollars. And I thought we had one more slide, but I guess we don't. So really what we're looking for is, again, the board to authorize this phase 2 expenditures of $3 million to be distributed to the schools on a per pupil basis, and then the due date for the phase 1 nonprofit and small business relief to September 18, and increase that possible grant to businesses and nonprofits to $15,000.
Okay, any questions, clarifications? Otherwise, a motion to approve this would be appropriate. Where are you at, folks?
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Steve. Do we have a second? Thank you, Jeff. All right. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. We met with Wacosa last night, and you know Wacosa provides services for our disabled individuals across this county. We were servicing around 620 individuals. We're now down to about 230, just with the situation that we have. Also, their funding has dramatically decreased. They were on survival, but that aid from the legislature has helped. However, they still remain in great need. Because they have over 50 employees, they do not qualify for any of the money that we were talking about in the CARES. I was just wondering, is there, Mike, is there any way that we could have any funding for them for their PPE at all, even if it's a small amount?
Are you talking about all nonprofits that are larger than that then, Joe? Because I don't know how we do it for only one.
I guess we have some nonprofits that function here that go out beyond our region. These are people that are serviced directly in Stearns County.
Yeah, my question though is if you're asking for whether, before Mike answers it, whether we could go above the 50 for a nonprofit, you wouldn't want to limit it to only one nonprofit, would you? I think that would create a problem.
How about this? We look and see if there's any other programming that could more broadly apply. I don't know if it's out there, but maybe it's worth a look.
Yeah, we can, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, we could look at that. I mean, there's the CARES Act dollars it's not limited to 50 employees for nonprofits by any means. And so there's two ways we could look at that. If they're providing services, helping people that are impacted by COVID, that is one angle, and the other is just if they have costs, just like we've been talking about, personal protective equipment and computers and software and all that kind of thing. And so I think the committee can take a look at that. I don't know what the extent of the need is, but we'll talk about that at our next meeting.
Okay, so at this point, action would be appropriate? Is that the case?
Commissioner Persky, if someone from Wacosta wants to communicate with us, that would be great, so we can kind of understand the needs.
Okay, I'll make that happen.
Thank you, Joe. All right, so we need approval for this?
You have a motion and a second, Lee, already.
All righty. Is there any further comments? If not, all those in favor say aye. District 1.
Aye.
District 2.
Aye.
3. Aye. 4. Aye. Steve?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you. I know the schools are going to appreciate that action.
All righty. Next item, Steve, you want to walk us through this?
Yep, Steve, I'll just maybe introduce, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. As you know, a few years back, we joined a state program of performance measurements, and that puts us in a kind of a pool where we're compared on a number of measures with a number of local governments throughout the state. We also get a little bit of money because we're involved in that. But we've taken that a much farther, and we've begun to compile a number of, as you can see in the one book that was sent to you, 40-some performance indicators, which is, some of those we were always collecting, some we weren't, but we pulled them together, 40-some of them, talk about what we do, how we do it, and workloads and that kind of thing, and just indicators of how well we're doing. And we like to talk about this at budget time because it's a time that we're making our plan for the coming year. And so what it does is it allows us as we go through the budget to talk about performance and create a discussion really about what we're funding. And it provides the board with the same opportunity and also so that you can monitor how we're doing in a number of areas. And so we only picked, I think, maybe half of them to present and talk about with you today, but you do have the book of all of them. And certainly if you have any questions or comments about any of those, you can try to answer them today or later during the budget process. And we're going to do this a little different this year, is you are going to see a number of the department directors talk to you about each of these indicators, so you don't have to listen to me drone on about them. You can hear a different voice and see a different face. But yeah, Steve's gonna take it.
Steve's gonna drone on and on.
I will drone on and on, yes. Let me see if I can share the screen with the PowerPoint. It's not doing, okay, here we go. All right. Okay, I think you can see that. I'm hoping.
Yep, looks good.
All right. Good morning, Commissioners. Mr. Chair, my name is Steve Hammis. I'm the Assistant Administrator for the county. As Mike indicated, the departments have been putting forth more and additional performance measures over the last couple of years. Our goal is to always try to move that forward and improve upon it a little bit each year as a way to tell a more accurate and better story for the public on what activities the county is involved in and how the services the county provides impacts people's lives. As Mike indicated, we're going to have department directors introduce and discuss their own performance measures this year, so you aren't hearing either myself or Mike. Before I get into them, I just wanted to go over that one of the things we always hope for is that our departments are choosing goals that reflect the values that the county has been operating under for the past several years. Again, these goals are that we strive to be professional, approachable, responsive, collaborative, and fair and equitable. And so as we go through these goals, you'll see that most departments are having goals that are tied to one or more of these goals to, again, advance our services to the public. And so with that, I think the first one is Janelle from the County Attorney's Office, if she's on here. Is Janelle on here?
I'm here.
Okay,
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yep,
All right.
very much so.
All right. The Criminal Division resources, as you can see from that red line, it might look like crime is actually a little bit down. No, we are simply choosing the order in which we are putting files into the criminal justice system. As soon as COVID happened, our court hearings became not only less, but became online. And we knew that new matters being filed that were not persons being held in custody under strict timelines would just sit there without a hearing getting set. So we have very intentionally not filed new felony and gross misdemeanor charges on cases that would not be set anyway. So you're going to see that go right back up to that 1,200 felony level that we've been at now for a number of years. But we are not, again, intentionally putting that into the court system when we can't do anything. We're working very closely with the Public Defender's Office and the Sheriff on the use of the jail space, understanding that by bringing people in and out of the jail, we're creating additional risks, and then it's our job to make sure that these people are taken care of. So again, if we can't make progress in the court system with these files, we're simply waiting until we can. And that's starting to happen now. Thank you for the resource of the felony courtroom in the basement of the administration center. It is appropriately spaced. It is extremely professionally well done. And we are very proud of the ability to now begin to move felony and misdemeanor jury trials here in Stearns County. Not every county in the state is doing that, but we are starting to do that here now. So we are actively managing this resource. We do hope to be able to keep the ability to do remote court hearings, to not transfer defendants from jail to jail and place to place around the state. Although we have had a slowdown and we do have a backlog, we do have a very intentional plan now to move the court system forward and to get back where it is that we need to be. On the juvenile division, on the next slide, you can see that our, oh wait, see if you move that.
Well, there we go.
On the juvenile division, likewise, child protection cases are running pretty steady right now. If anything, we have had increased action with services due to the changing legal requirements and changing timing that they have been experiencing during these times. It's going well. In fact, actually, we're probably spending even more time with human services now online because we're not all running back and forth to court every single day. We can actually get some big picture things done. We're looking at some different ways to handle things. And ultimately, juvenile crime going down is, we believe, in part because the school resource officers didn't have contact with the kids the last 3 months of school. That's usually when we start seeing things that are going on. We have reports that will come to those school resource officers when they're literally physically in the same place with the kids. And with the kids not being present, we did see those numbers go down. But we'll see what that looks like now as people go back to school. Overall, in the county attorney's office, our numbers are running right about the same as they have the last 2 or 3 months. We're just being very intentional in how we handle the limited resources of the court system at this time.
Okay. Then next we go to the auditor's office. Randy?
Thank you, Steve. So the first one we have is our bond rating, and we have a very good bond rating at AA+. Really in our organization, there's really not a lot more we can do. The next level is AAA. Outside the metro area, it's pretty tough to get to AAA. Other factors they look at are economic factors, the region, and then overlapping debt. So the total debt in the county by all the governmental entities they also look at. And that's the area where we're a little higher than some other counties. But that's a very strong financial indicator as a AA+. That's very good. I'll go to the next one, Steve. So debt service per capita has been going down. It's now leveling off. We're doing very well in this one. We're the 14th lowest in the state currently. We have 8 outstanding debt issues, outstanding bonds. 2 of them are for watershed districts. 3 will be paid off in the next couple of years, and then 3 will remain. Now, with the capital improvement plan, we will see some additional debt be put on, and this number likely will increase. But as of right now, and even with the new debt, I think we'll still be in a strong position. We are the lowest of the MICA counties right now. Go to the next one. So this is our delinquent payment plans. Number of plans has gone up and now have reached the top and starting to decline. I think this is one of the items we're doing to try to bring delinquency down in the county, and that seems to be working. We also do monthly and quarterly payment plans, and then online payments, of course. And then doing an online payment, you can do a partial payment, so if you can't afford to pay the whole thing at once, we do it all. So the number of delinquencies has gone down. One of the factors we look at is delinquency letters. In December, we send out letters to all people that have delinquent property taxes. And 10 years ago, that was about 4,000, just over that, and now we're doing about 2,000. So that's gone to about half of what it has been. So this shows some very good activity to help bring delinquency down, and that's of course good for our citizens to not have the delinquency.
Just a question, Randy. How much flexibility in terms of the statutes do you have with the delinquent payments? Is without a doubt, sooner or later you talk to somebody that is in significant straits. What can you do, or what do you have the authority to do to deal with that?
Yeah, and we are trying to help them out best we can. And later you'll see also in our tax forfeitures that's going down too. Our goal is to help people, stay in their house, keep their property. We don't want to be taking people's property, but we do need to get taxes paid. We are a little bit in the gray area in how we handle some of this.
Yes.
The state is pretty, statutes at least, have not really caught up with the modern finance methods. So we do payment plans and different things, and they're basically a partial payment that's allowed, but they would rather see a confession of judgment thing where somebody pays once a year and they have 10 years to pay off, which is not very successful that we've found. This way, where we have payment plans that we'll set up for 2 or 3 years with people, has been very successful. So we're kind of a little bit in the gray area on some of this. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
This next one on electronic tax statements. So this is both for our property tax statements and our TNTs. We're putting this information out on all the correspondence that we send out, and also working with the assessor's office. They are putting a checkbox on their homestead applications. So we're reaching the new residents that move in or move a lot more effectively than we have before, and we're seeing this number continue to increase. And this, of course, saves us a lot of postage, and it's a lot more automated method of getting the tax statement and TNT to people. So this has been very successful. Go ahead, Steve. My last slide is on tax forfeiture. I think you guys have seen some of this. I won't spend a lot of time, but we did have the bubble in the early 2010-11 area, and we sold off that inventory for the most part. So sales continue to go down because the number of properties are going down and the number of sales are going down. Our inventory also is at the lowest it's been for a long time. What we're getting now is structures that are not desirable, that need to be cleaned up, which is probably what we should be getting. And in 2020, we'll do probably 3 cleanups. And we do have a balance in a reserve account to help pay for that. Eventually, the revenues probably won't keep up with the costs. And I know the board, especially Commissioner Lenzmeyer, has been champion in this area. So any desirable properties we're getting cleaned up and getting back on the tax. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right.
The only performance measure historically that I personally tracked was the bond rating. And the bond rating maybe is impacted, like as Randy stated, by the debt and the management of overlapping jurisdictions, and also the local economy. And all those factors are distilled down into one rating element. And if it's done properly, it's a valuable tool for us. There was a situation, not in the recent past, but in the past there was a, let's call it a scheme, where the bond houses created a tool where, in effect, jurisdictions were allowed to buy down their bond rating, so to speak. Actually, it's more like bond buy up, and that got out of hand. Randy, you might have a better memory on this. I don't know much more about it. I'd have to get on DuckDuckGo and take a look at it to remind myself, but you can briefly remind board members of how that went.
Yeah, so, and even currently, we do, on most issues, do get insurance on our bond issues. So
That was it.
we get AAA rating even though we're AA plus. And if they're like the law enforcement center, they're state backed also, where we get part of that AAA state rating. So yeah, we're getting the best rate we can.
Anyway,
All
I
right.
digress.
Moving on, environmental services is next, and Shelley.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Nice to see you and the board members again. The performance members, the performance measure that we're going to first discuss is the compliance with Minnesota Statute 1599, requiring permits to be issued within 60 days. The reason I use this performance measure is because of the majority of the business that we do and that people know us for is so. As you can see, in 2019, we had a slight dip in our performance measure, and actually that related to 2 permits that were registrations and in the feedlot area. So we've actually resolved one, and it was right at the 60-day lines. We did include it in the number, but you'll see that our goal is not to issue permits within 60 days, but actually to issue the majority of our permits within 10 to 14 days. We don't have that specific information because our permits will range with sub and variances and conditional use permits all the way up to that 60 days. But we do try to have, as you can see, the majority of our work done in a timely manner to be in compliance with the state requirements. So we will continue to do that. We know that our permit numbers, the 2020 is an estimate, but we think that might be a little low. So we are looking for a higher number for next year. And then if you want to move forward to the next one, Steve. This is actually a measure that the entire state looks at their recycling rates. And you can see that we went down a little bit in 17 and 18. And we expect it to go down in 19. It may, again, continue to go down in 2020. And at the bottom, there are 3 factors that are listed as to why the compliant or the rate would be decreasing. And first, that it's self-reporting for these 8 entities. And so therefore, we can't mandate it. They don't always report. MSW, which is municipal solid waste and recycling data, has been reported to the state as of 2016. So rather than coming through us as a county, they report directly to the state, which decreases the amount of reporting. That doesn't help us. And then the third has been a decline in the recycling markets. So as we have seen and promoted more recycling, the actual recycling markets have dried up. And China not taking as many products has also been a factor. What we're going to see, though, in our 2019 estimate and probably in 20 is we also had a loss of a major manufacturer that contributed highly to our recycling rate, which is Frigidaire. They did a lot of recycling at that particular location, and that counted towards Stearns County's recycling rate. So we're not quite sure what the 2020 or what the 2019 estimate will be, but we do expect that we'll go down and hopefully we'll stay pretty close to that 35%, which is what's expected for us as the state level. We are really looking for a plastic recycling to go up, as well as our work with Tri-County and some of our organics. So we will see some changes. Hopefully, there'll be small numbers, but they'll be significant in the type of materials that we're recycling. And I think organics has a lot of potential, and we hope that that will shore up that recycling rate for us as a whole. And that's all I have for you today.
Okay. All right, moving on, we have highway. Jody, let's talk about snow, since it's 80 degrees outside.
Thank you. Sorry, good morning. The performance measure we're talking about for highway department is the snow and ice removal times on the county highway system. And keep in mind that our targets or deliverables that we set up are based on more of a worst case event, more than just your 4-hour snowfall, but one where you get a significant amount of snow over a longer amount of time and then the temperatures drop. So that's why you might think that some of these don't seem like very lofty goals, but it's more related to when we have those wind conditions or the temperatures that are dropping. We continue on average to have our plow routes take about 4.5 to 5 hours. Obviously, that's a balancing act between how much money we spend on it, how long those routes are, how many people we have working on it. Generally, we meet these thresholds, except for those times when we pull the crews so they can get some rest and we have wind, and then those wheel paths are covered back up. One thing we did try during the 2019-20 snow season is implementing a B shift. Working within the parameters of the union contracts, we hired a couple of seasonal plow operators, and we used our spare driver that we have, along with one of our mechanics, to put 4 people onto a B shift so that we could try to extend our coverage in the St. Cloud district. And again, we only have the ability to do that within the St. Cloud district based on our union contracts. We did also have one person who was permanently on nights throughout the snow and ice season, and we're hoping to improve on that to continue improving on our overall snow and ice control response. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks. The next department is Human
Just a
Resources.
quick question for Jody. Jody, has COVID had any negative effect on the snow removal at all?
Not on snow removal yet, because it really kind of hit us after the season was for the most part done. Actually, it's probably better for us because then we don't have to worry about our maintenance crews working in close proximity to each other. So that's probably a more desirable work function to have in the area of COVID than some of our other highway maintenance tasks.
Okay. All right, the next department is Human Resources. Jennifer wasn't able to be here, so I'll take her measure here myself. This one is looking at applicant diversity. Again, this ties to our goals of wanting to be approachable and wanting to be fair and equitable. You can see we've got 3 years worth of tracking our applicant pools based on whether or not they were persons of color or if they were disabled applicants. Those numbers for persons of color have been holding steady at about 13%. If you look at the demographics for Stearns County, 12% of our population is made up of persons of color, so that's reflecting the overall community. The number of disabled applicants we've been having has been increasing over the past couple of years from 4 to 6%. 2020 has been an interesting year with the, due to COVID and everything else going on. We have slowed recruitments down by about 40%. We are only currently hiring positions that are tied to law enforcement, public safety, or ones that are tied to grant dollars, like in human services, where we have needs to meet with clients. Otherwise, positions are really on a case-by-case basis to determine how long we can go before we need to fill a position. But the increase in applications by members who are, by people who've been disabled has risen by about 3%. The persons of color has increased by about 2%. We have been working on impacting our diversity and inclusion recruitment efforts to show that Stearns County is a employer of choice for all members of our community, reaching out to job fairs through the different colleges in the area and working with other large employers, certainly working with Frigidaire as they were going through their closure to reach out and see if we could grab some of those employees and offer them employment in some of our openings. And I think that covers all of those notes. So I'm going to move forward again to Human Services and Melissa, who did an excellent job on coming up with her measures and making them very logical and quantitative. So thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Steve. Melissa Huberty, the Human Services Administrator. All of the Human Services performance measures presented today, which there are 5 I'm going to go over, incorporate goals around integrated services across all of the divisions in Human Services with a focus on trying to move further towards prevention. The first is a Case Aid Connector goal, and these are positions that we repurposed about a year ago to focus in on those people we serve that are the most needy and who often require the use of numerous deep end services. So we're gathering data on the outcomes of these services, and if effective, we'll continue to focus our energies on this population of people because it's better for the human condition and of course saves taxpayer dollars. So we have a couple of grants highlighted in this section, both an opioid grant and a grant focused on helping teen parents that cap the amount of people we can actually work with. But we hope to prove the effectiveness of these prevention types of activities and serve clients in a better way and receive more funding to do services that we know make a difference to individuals and families. Next goal on the next slide is one that's children impacted by prenatal exposure and parental substance use. One of the biggest bills in any county government is out-of-home placement. So what we're doing is we're connecting public health nurses with folks that we know we're serving who are pregnant and have problems with substance use issues. We know that when we get there earlier, we can have clean babies when they're born. And then, of course, we don't need to do out-of-home placements later. So we're monitoring this and actually trying to do more proactive efforts earlier in the pregnancy. Next goal is civil commitments. This is a goal that we have done a lot of work to prevent people from going into state hospitals and also trying to work with people getting out of state hospitals. There's quite a bit in here that we don't have control over, but I measure it nonetheless. Because civil commitment is also probably the largest bill next to out-of-home placement in any county government. And it really can be a barometer of overall health in the community. So we monitor what's going on in here, even though we don't have complete control, because it's a good kind of barometer of how the overall health of the county is coming along. The next goal is our mental health performance goal. We've been to the board on a number of occasions to talk about our large collaborative efforts with human services, law enforcement, Central Minnesota Mental Health Center, Centricare, our co-responder model. And of course, what's happening is we see our high utilizers going down, which is a great thing because we're doing more prevention services. And we'll be back to the board if we get our grant that we were there recently to add some FTEs to work with people who are experiencing homelessness. So we'll be back soon with that. And the final goal is a targeted case management reimbursement rate. To get targeted case management reimbursements, it's a very complicated process. It not only matters how the social workers enter information into an extremely archaic system, but also about people receiving services maintaining their healthcare coverage. So we've been doing a lot of work with people to get on healthcare and stay on healthcare. And we've been quite focused on this to try to help the most vulnerable people in our community, and our rates are going up. So we've been successful, but we want to see that target rate keep going up to get the most reimbursement for the services we're actually providing.
Okay, thank you. Next, we move to our Property Services Department and Jeff Johnson and Jake.
Good morning. Good morning. This is Jeff Johnson. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I have two performance measures that I'll be addressing with you this morning. The first is with the land services area, particularly with the surveyors group. Platting is a statutory requirement, as we all know. We partner with other departments in the county, such as environmental services, land records management, recording services, and highway. In addition to that, we work collaboratively with private surveyors and local municipalities in reviewing the platting requirements. We also work closely with property landowners who are the customer in this process, and we use the private surveyor as the point of contact. Platting usually takes anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks. That's basically the time frame that we like to impose on ourselves to ensure that these plats move along rather quickly. However, we do encounter and have to resolve a variety of land title issues that go beyond plat checking. It's not uncommon for us to work with the recorder, the survey, and the environmental people to assist with the property owners with different legal aspects that deal with the platting. Typically, the statutes that come into play are 505, 515B, 508, and 160. These deal with all subdivisions, common interest communities, registered land surveys, and right-of-ways. And as you can see from the diagram that's being presented, back in 2017, there were about 101 plats and subdivisions that were processed, and 18, a total of 84. In 2019, 70. And at the time when this material was put together, we had as many as 47. Today, and that was back in May, today we're looking at about 64, and we're on track to do about 93 subdivisions today. Prior to 2017, which was the highest volume date, we were doing in the neighborhood of 60 to 80. We think it's really important that we communicate with all partners, and that's why it's important when we have a large volume of activity, keep everyone informed about the process. We continue to look at ways to improve on this process, and we're hopeful that maybe before too long we will have something at least internally in terms of a plat status tracker that will allow us to improve our communications both internally and then perhaps extend it outwards externally to our partners. The next slide, please, unless there's questions about the platting process. All right, we can move on to the next one. This deals with the quintile reassessment review standards. The assessors in Minnesota are required by law to value property or view property once every 5 years. In other words, 20% of the properties are subject to review, and that's to establish the market value of each parcel of real property listed for taxation. And at least 1/5 of those parcels listed should be appraised each year with reference to the assessment date of January 2nd. We've been tracking this for some time, and in 2016, the county average was 94.4%, and the statewide average was 89.5%. As you move to the present day, 2017, we increased that inspection quintile standard to 98.7, compared to 91.3 statewide. In 2018, 99.5, compared to 93.0%, and in 2019, 99.7 to 94.6%. As you can see, we've exceeded the state average. We're certainly well within the parameters and have met the quintile reassessment standard. A year ago, we viewed about 24% of the total parcel count, and in the prior 2 years, we were in that same realm of 24 to a little over 24, 26%. To date, we only had 87 parcels that still required inspection after the current assessment cycle of 2019 and 2020. So we take great pride in trying to get out and review properties on a regular basis. This year, COVID-19 pandemic presents some real challenges for us. We've had to adapt and implement what was called a desk review appraisal process, which we're using regional MLS resources. aerial photographs, and then most recently, Jake and his team have assembled and put out there a property verification survey. We informed property owners of this new practice by way of a postcard mailing, and as of last week, we had exceeded the 50 percentile response, which we think is quite good. We also intend to give it a boost, perhaps by doing a second mailing to those who have not responded to the survey, but also in early September, we plan on being on Chasm and speaking about the desk review process and how we want to increase our quintile inspection reviews in this manner. That pretty much concludes what I have to offer. Are there any questions regarding the quintile reassessment review process? All right, thank you.
Jeff, I have a question. This is Jeff Morgan. This has come up once or twice. Of the 20% of the properties that you review, are the property owners required to allow the assessor inside their home?
Commissioner Morgan, that's a very good question. There is a statute that encourages property owners to work with assessors. If they blatantly refuse to allow someone in the house and it's considered a refusal, it would prevent them from having their appeal heard at the local Board of Appeal and Equalization. There was a statute that was passed years ago that indicated that if the assessor was not provided access, the assessor was required to notify the local board or the county board in the event that this property was to be appealed. Now, there are circumstances in which a property owner may feel uncomfortable. We can reschedule and do a review at a more appropriate time. Or if the property owner is uncomfortable, we don't try to impose ourselves and force ourselves into homes, but we will ask questions and do what's called an overview. Typically, we try to get into most homes once every 10 years. Every 5 years is the standard, but if there are ways to work around that, we will attempt to do that. But I hope that answers your questions. I know it's a real sensitive issue with property owners, particularly in this day and age with safety and now with COVID. We need to exercise caution, but also be respectful of the property owners and their wishes.
But what does the law say? Is it yes or no?
The law says that they can refuse us, and we'll ask questions about the house. But if they choose to appeal the assessment, then their assessment will not be acted on until the assessor is given access to the property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have the Sheriff's Office with, I see Sheriff Soika is in the room.
Yes, good morning. Well, I guess good afternoon, Commissioners. I present our Part 1 and Part 2 crimes as one of our performance measures. Minnesota divides all criminal acts basically into Part 1 or Part 2. Part 1, as you can see, is the more serious crimes, murders, rapes, robberies, and then the Part 2 crimes are the lesser ones, the forgeries, frauds, as it says there. The reason I'm actually presenting this is, as you can see, we didn't have a terrible year in 2017 where we jumped up that much in murders and rapes. What was happening back then was we were not reporting correctly through the RMS system that we were using. So if the management system that we were using at the time wasn't accurately getting the data input at the front end, then it wasn't reporting it to the state correctly at the back end. So we have switched since 2018 basically to a web-based records management system. That should alleviate the problem, and I'm hoping back in the end of 2020 here, more accurate numbers for you, basically 2018, 2019, and 2020 numbers.
Okay, thank you. The last department that we'll present is Veterans. Corey, are you in the room?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Mr. Chair, Commissioner members, so as I think our data here is pretty self-explanatory in terms of the dollar amounts that are coming into the county. I think that these numbers are a little bit more nuanced than what they reflect, in that those numbers are a result of not just necessarily last year, and even the change isn't necessarily representative of the work we did just in that particular year. Those numbers are cumulative over the years of what have, benefits that are earned from veterans in previous years carried into the following year. What I do think is, having both the population and these compensation dollars looked at, it is our office. We're probably the largest player in this area that assists veterans in Stearns County with accessing benefits. So as you see, our veteran population is decreasing, and we expect it to decrease. The majority of our veterans in Stearns County are over the age of 65, and yet our compensation dollars are increasing. And so I do think that the work of our office is a significant and probably the largest contributor to that.
Okay. Thank you. Before we open it up for any questions, I just want to let the board know that we will be posting all of the performance measures on the budget's website, so that the public has a chance to look over the performance measures that were related to today, as well as all the other performance measures that departments submitted, so they get a better ability to understand what departments do and the services that are involved. And with that, are there any questions from the board on anything that you've heard today?
The only point that I would make is that so many of the services that are offered the departments are really interrelated. And so as a result, it's challenging on one hand to isolate those services to just a specific department. But on the other hand, you got to start somewhere and show something. So it has, what you're trying to do, it has merit, but it also has limitations. So good job.
All right. If there's no other questions, I guess thank you for your time, and
thanks, Steve,
Thank you.
and members of the team. I'm trying to conclude or talk about the budget with sharing my screen, but I'm unable to do that. If someone can give me back the rights to the Williams presenter computer. Thank you. I just wanted to give you a glimpse of kind of where we're heading with the budget at this time. And as you know, you'll get detail about this at your next board meeting, but I wanted to be sure that you saw kind of where we were at this point. And you can see here that we have a budget that has slightly less expenditures in total, less revenues in total. And what that results in is an increase in the levy of 1.8%, which is about $1.5 million. Our tax capacity is increasing by nearly 5.5%, and so the resulting tax rate would be a drop of nearly 3.5%. That 1.8% increase in the levy is about actually a little less than the real growth. So actually the construction growth and what TIF dollars have converted back to regular taxable property. So you can see, and we've got a little bit of a trend developing, which is good, I think, to keep that tax rate, the rate dropping. And you'll see in the next reporting really the major drivers of some of these changes, but we wanted to make sure that we give you a glimpse of the overall budget. And if you have any comments about that or where you want to see us heading, we certainly are all ears at this point. Our departments did, as you can see, a good job with performance measures, but I would also compliment the department directors because they did a good job bringing in a budget here that is, we have very few increases other than a few things like our contracts, employee contracts are really probably the major driver in this budget, with a 2% increase coming in January and a 0.5% coming in July of 2021. But there's other major things in there that we'll share with you next week. But again, we wanted to have this process. We were striving to have a very minimal increase or even no increase in the levy. I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Questions for Dr. Willie?
I guess I'll go ahead and throw something out. I know we're also running over, but this is important. Thank you, staff, for putting this together. One of the things of note is not an increase in the human services budget, which is pretty tricky given all of the unfunded mandates we're expected to do, particularly about out-of-home placement and commitments, et cetera. A question I have, and this, I know that we'll know more once we see property tax payments in October. We'll know more if there is another state budget forecast. I know you were trying to keep this down. I mean, I think all of us would love it if we could figure out how to get it down further. A question I have, given if the feds don't come through with any help to state and local governments, given the deficit that Matt and others talked about on the state side, when do you see us looking at or what tools will you use to make a recommendation about dipping into reserves?
Well, that's a good question. And as we heard from Micah this morning, there's a lot of unknowns and with the state deficit, we don't really know what that will do to some of our revenues, as you said, Commissioner Clark. But this budget, as we have it today, has a very minor amount of use of fund balance. It's any fund balance we're using is out of what we call a project fund. So it's money that's really set aside for some capital expenditures. And I believe we had $500,000 in there. I see Randy and Steve nodding that we were using $500,000 of that. And so I think that that could come into play for two reasons. One, if we're looking at some dramatic decline in state revenues, for example, or if we've got some director from the board to get this down lower, I could see us using some fund balance to do that. And then, of course, we'll probably want to be looking ahead to see what that could do to us in our 2022 budget as well. And I don't know, Randy, you have a comment about that too. But.
No, that makes sense. And I think I know that if and Leah, this is where the geezer comment I'm sure will come in, is that if the state has to, they're past at this point it appears they're past shifts being able to be enough, et cetera, unless there's some recovery that we probably don't have reason to believe will happen fast enough. But generally speaking, it's not like cuts or unallotments have also come with an ability to say, okay, you don't have to provide these services anymore. So we will be required, likely, to still provide all of the required services, but with less money. So, I mean, a good thing is we do have some accounts we could be looking at, but at least from my standpoint, I know this is the high level. We don't want to go down from here. But do we even have enough information yet? Like, I guess I'm a little concerned. There's a part of me that wants to say, can we dip into them now? But if we do, and we're relying on that and the state cuts a lot, we may put ourselves in a more challenging situation, it seems. But perhaps you can say more about that.
Yeah, well, I think that it could even go the other way. I mean, if the Congress acts and we can take the CARES Act dollars and use them differently and
absolutely. I still hope they do that.
It could go a number of ways. So it is a little early, I think, in how much information we'll have by the time you need to adopt the final budget in early December. Hopefully we'll have enough that you're comfortable. As you all know, you'll need to adopt a preliminary levy in September. And then you don't need to adopt the final levy until, I can't remember our date. It might be late November or early December. So, and Randy, I think you were going to say something.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Terrell, you are correct that we do have some reserves we could look at if we get unallotted or if there's, budget strains here. I think the budget we put together here with the 1.8% levy increase, as Mike was saying, that's our new construction and our decertification of TIF districts. So that's the growth of the tax base. I think it's a pretty, and I know, Jeff, you've mentioned this in the before, why don't we limit that levy growth to that? And that's what this budget does. It limits the levy growth to that new growth. So these are people that have just built a house and they're of course going to pay more taxes because they have that house. So, and I would agree at this point to use fund balance would not be wise, and to save that, that shot for later when we may need it. So.
And any other questions on this? We might find out a little later that later is already here, but relative to short comings, relative to budget, you got fund balances from we've got reserves, and some of you haven't been around long enough to listen to my periodic complaint that our reserves are more than we really need. Well, now we're probably in a good spot. Second of all, if we have to borrow, interest rates are at record low, and if we have to borrow, we can. Now we have lived through a situation where we had to cut spending in a very short term, like 60 days, and that was back again the Ventura Pawlenty administration crossover days of unallotment, where we had 60 days to come up with cuts. And the place we got the cuts, one of the few places we can act that quickly, is the highway budget. We had to cancel projects. So those are tools that are available. It's sort of like, going to the dentist. You wish you didn't have to do that, but you know that the only answer in the medium term is to go through some short-term pain. So we've had this experience before. There's enough gray hair left in the organization that remember all that. So there's your strategy in a nutshell. It isn't fun. It isn't perfect. It's what we got to work with. Anything else? Somebody got? If not, we'll go to items by commissioners. District 1.
Thank you. Actually, we just didn't have time, and we probably don't right now to do a COVID update, but I hope that we continue to do that because that might be one of the few times people see it. So I want to encourage people to go on our website if you're curious about where we're at. We continue to do a lot of good work on that. And then when Randy was talking about the electronic tax payment, the statements, I don't know about others, but it was like, oh, well, of course we'd have something like that. So I have gone on, want to encourage other people, you don't have to wait to have a new house, save us a little bit of money and time.
Anything else? Okay, District 2.
I have nothing other than I appreciate everybody participating in the marathon today.
I'll be right out there, baby. District 3, Jeff?
I have nothing at this time.
Okay, we'll jump over.
One more thing. I'm going to probably call Mike just to let him know I'm going to call Mike and talk to him about some things. Probably tomorrow.
Okay, well, have a nice talk. Steve?
Thank you.
Don't have much. We're going to should almost be getting close to wrapping up the one watershed, one plan discussions with Sauk River. So we got a meeting on Thursday. So Oh, and I'm the AMC representative for farm. How do you say it? Cervidae, or deer and whatever.
What are you talking about, Steve?
Well,
Medication?
they're doing the state's revising the rules on raising antlered animals like elk and deer, and
Oh,
so tomorrow morning we have a committee meeting to look at the rules for the state. So
who's we?
what's that?
Who's we, Steve?
The Department of Ag. There's like DNR, a bunch of different organizations.
Okay. Anything else?
I don't know much about deer, but I'm on it.
Yeah. Place out in Cold Spring where he raises elk and alpacas together, and it works. Anything else?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Building on the discussion of our last meeting, talking about ways to integrate the small airport into the efforts of the St. Cloud airport going forward. One of the things that came up yesterday is Princeton very much wants to be kept apprised of what's happening at the St. Cloud airport, looking for ways that they could be play some role going forward in the service provided at St. Cloud. And for some reason, that rang a bell. Why would I have something in my memory banks about Princeton Airport? And then it dawned on me, got onto the internet, and it brought me back to the mid 80s and the days of Casey Ramirez. And Casey Ramirez, for folks that aren't in the geezer class, was a guy that just stepped out of nowhere, stepped into the city of Princeton and started spending his own money on airport efforts. A long story short, the city of Princeton thought that was really pretty cool, and accepted his assistance. Some of them were pretty bizarre, like putting palm trees on Main Street, Princeton, and some other efforts. Well, long story short, Casey got busted. So turns out that his ill-gotten gains, his gains were ill-gotten, and it was quite a case back then. So I hope Princeton hasn't got another Casey Ramirez in their proposal, but crazy things that remind you of stuff that happened a long time ago. And with that, I think we've extended the pain to the maximum of our ability to absorb it. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, folks. This went well despite ourselves.
Thank you. Bye.